Yes, we are live.
Okay, good evening. My name is Ann Savage, and I'm the president of the City School District of Albany Board of Education. On behalf of the board, I welcome you all to our web-based meeting. We're very pleased that so many people have been joining us virtually since we began meeting by web, and we hope that will continue. If you need to let a friend know how to connect, they can find instructions at albanyschools.org/BOE. For those of us who are joining us tonight, you will have noticed that we are now using a new tool, Microsoft Teams, to run our meetings, and we're looking forward to working with the many new features that Teams offers us. I hope you will be patient as we work with this new tool. For example, tonight you are likely to see a combination of virtual and physical hand raising for voting, but we will, as always, announce the results of the vote so there's clarity about how the vote went. Meeting by web is, of course, part of our effort to ensure that our meetings remain accessible to members of the public who would like to attend them, while also protecting the health of our community and doing our part to reduce transmission of COVID-19. Normally, by law, we meet in person, but as a result of Governor Cuomo's executive order, we may legally meet by video conference, and we plan to do that while the executive order is in force. For members of the public joining from home, we will be showing the relevant signs and slides and documents in the virtual meeting screen, and you can also access them via albanyschools.org/BOE. Also, many of you know our meetings are also always recorded, and the audio files are uploaded a few days after the meeting on our Board Docs platform. We hope soon to be replacing that with video recordings so that people who cannot listen in right now can hear and see the meeting at their convenience. We invite those of you who choose to join us as we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the
of
United States of America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic for
which
which
it
it stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
justice.
liberty and justice for all.
In addition to saying the Pledge of Allegiance, we always focus our meetings by restating the mission of the City School District of Albany, which is to work in partnership with our diverse community to engage every learner in a robust educational program designed to provide the knowledge and skills necessary for success. Superintendent Adams, do you have a report for us?
Yes, I do. Thank you so very much, Madam President and members of the board. I would like to begin my report tonight by recognizing the outstanding achievements of two Albany High School students that the State Education Department has named to this year's My Brother's Keeper Fellows Program. Robert Glover and Jereen. Yes. Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Robert Glover and Jereen Morris are among 71 MBK Fellows representing 24 school districts across New York State. Mr. Glover and Mr. Morris will be juniors at Albany High School this fall. These exceptional young men have been identified as leaders in our community and will take part in mentor relationship opportunities in government, education, and business over the coming year. They also will have the opportunity to develop and execute a service project related to a New York State MBK initiative, such as ensuring ensuring equitable access to high quality schools and programs, expanding prevention, early warning, and intervention services, responding to structural and institutional racism, or engaging families and communities in a trusted and respectful way. In addition, they will serve on the statewide MBK Fellows Work Group to provide valuable input on the development and implementation of a statewide MBK mentoring network. Board of Regents Chancellor Betty Rosa noted that this is an especially significant time in our nation's history for this year's class of MBK Fellows, and I wholeheartedly agree. As a society, we are confronting the COVID-19 crisis and systemic barriers of racism and social injustice, along with inequities and inequalities that pervade our healthcare and education systems as a result. Now more than ever, the opportunity for our students to participate in the MBK Fellows Program means an opportunity for them to have a positive and lasting impact on their world. It is my pleasure to congratulate Mr. Glover and Mr. Morris on their selection for this year's cohort. Last Friday afternoon, we were notified that a person who had been in 2 of our buildings tested positive for COVID-19. We followed our required reporting practices immediately with our district medical director, Dr. Laura Staff, notifying Albany County Department of Health and initiating contact tracing. The 2 buildings that were affected were Montessori Magnet School and Harriet Gibbons Student Service Center. This is the 4th positive test that we have been informed of in our district since the COVID-19 school closure began. This is the first positive case confirmed in our district since early May. And you may recall that we had 2 positive cases in mid-March, just as the school closures were beginning. In each of the cases, the district confirmed that all required protocols were followed at the buildings. Our administrators contacted the district medical director in alignment with the Department of Health guidance, who then contacted DOH in order to follow the appropriate next steps. When the district was notified, or when we are notified of a positive COVID-19 case, we follow the guidance of the Department of Health. Contact tracing is conducted by the Department of Health, and the district notifies the impact school and families, as well as employees associated with that particular building. The district remains committed to conducting cleaning and sanitization at our buildings on a daily basis. In the event of a positive case, additional cleaning and sanitization will occur, and within the prescribed time frame aligned with the Department of Health guidance. We will continue to follow our health and safety guidelines with fidelity. As we look to develop our reopening plans, it is important to note that a key requirement as we look at how we are reopening will be the daily COVID-19 screening of all employees and students before they enter district buildings, as well as social distancing and wearing masks and other appropriate face coverings. I would like to share a reminder that tomorrow, Friday, is the last day to register for our virtual elementary school summer school program. Elementary summer school will begin August 3rd and will be conducted in the Google Classroom learning environment. This program is open to all district students in kindergarten through 5th grade, as well as to students in those grades who live in Albany but attend private, parochial, and charter schools. This will be a half-day program that will run each weekday through August 28th. You may find more information at the summer program section of our website, albanyschools.org. Thank you very much, and this concludes the superintendent's report.
So Mrs. Adams, I think what we were going to do tonight is to have you roll directly from the superintendent's report into the reopening conversation, since we know that that's of the utmost importance to the folks who may be attending from home.
Okay, absolutely. We are ready to move forward with our reopening discussion and to provide the board and our community with an update of where we are. We are starting with, we have so many updates with regard to our divisions and departments and the great work that they have been doing as we move forward. And so as we begin our presentations, we always start with our vision, mission, and goals, making sure that we are looking at all the decisions that we're making in determining that we are going to be a district of excellence, developing those caring relationships and engaging learning experiences for our students, and working in partnership with our diverse communities so that we will have a robust educational program for our children. Despite the environment or however they will have to come to school, We are always looking at our goals, which is to increase student achievement, enhance the delivery of quality instruction, build our leadership capacity, empower our families, and of course, partner with our diverse community. The purpose of these presentations is to provide an update on the process, the planning process, and the status of where we are with reopening our schools this coming September. The topics for discussion tonight: we will talk about the overall general guidance. These are some of the requirements that have come out of the guidance documents from the governor's office, from state ed, and from the Department of Health. Looking at what some of our elementary considerations are, our secondary considerations, talking about instructional technology and how we're looking to close that digital divide and then provide resources and opportunities for our students in that technological world. We know that it is important for our students to have healthy food and nutrition, and those options of what are we looking at in terms of food service, of course, maintenance and operations, and then we will discuss transportation. And so for this presentation, I am soliciting the assistance of our cabinet members so that each one can talk about their respective areas. The main requirements that we know that we are going to have to put into our plan, which is due on July 31st, is that in the beginning, we will have to submit 3 different options or suggestions that we have been working through: an in-person model, a hybrid model or blended learning model, and a virtual model. We are looking at developing some type of survey so that we can take in consideration how many of our parents are considering face-to-face instruction, online instruction, blended learning, etc., just so that we can get that temperature check to see what it is that our community is interested in. We are looking at enhancing the academic rigor and accountability. We know that the spring posed some challenges as we were thrust into over a weekend looking at an online environment. And so while everyone was learning at the same time, we know that moving forward, that we will need to make sure that we have those protocols in place so that we can enhance the academic rigor, so that we can close some of those gaps that our students may have experienced during this time, as well as the accountability piece. We know that part of the requirements will be that face coverings will be required. We are asking our families to provide masks for their children. We will be able to produce masks in terms and supply in terms of lost masks or damaged masks or whatever the case may be. But we're asking that parents view a mask as you would a school supply. When you go out and purchase school supplies for students, please consider getting a mask for your child. The district will have replacement masks, and we will have some options. We have face shields as an option for employees. It doesn't mean that it is a face shield alone. It just means that due to some medical concerns, we may need to have face shields. So we will have those available for our employees and for some of our students that may have some concerns with that and have special needs that we need to address. There will be daily health screenings for employees and students, which includes the temperature check. Our parents are asked to please help us with this and take the child's temperature before coming to school, although we do have a mechanism in place that we're exploring so that we can take the temperature before this child arrives to campus or upon entering campus. So we're looking at what those options would be. Contact tracing and coordination with the local health department guidelines. We will always do that as our medical director, Dr. Staff, make sure that we are in contact with the Department of Health should information come to us, and then we support them in any way that they determine is needed. Our maintenance staff is cleaning our buildings, disinfecting, and they're following the protocols as put out by Department of Health. We are looking at any of the materials that may need to be shared, and I say may need to be shared because we're not sure if we're going to have to share materials, because we are looking at students having individual packets of their own materials. But in the event that there are shared materials, then we're looking to minimize that. And then we're looking at what those cleaning protocols need to be in terms of disinfecting those items between touches and use. We will restrict school visitors unless it is for required school business, and that way we can help mitigate the amount of traffic that comes in and out of the building. And then, of course, we are always looking at students and staff to make sure that we have proper hand hygiene practices and making sure that we are aware of what those practices are and how we go about doing that. At this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Wilson Turner to talk about some of the elementary school considerations, and then we will move right through with each cabinet member addressing their area. Thank you.
Good evening. So the Elementary Reentry Subcommittee has worked diligently on developing the models that parents would be able to choose from as how elementary instruction will be delivered under the new guidelines and regulation. We've spent the majority of our time redesigning what in-person learning looks like to honor the 6-foot social distancing requirements, and also how we would roll that model into a hybrid model if we needed to. Our goal at this point in time is to try to get all of our K-5 students in school each and every day. The hybrid model would result in those students only being able to come in 2 days a week. And we are also just redesigning our virtual learning to ensure that it has that enhanced academic rigor and accountability that Mrs. Adams spoke about just a few moments ago, to ensure that we are able to use this time very intentionally to close the gaps that we know may exist as a result of how we had to close school due to COVID-19. A large part of our work has focused on identifying our building spaces that we would be able to use, and this has evolved over time. I think at the last board meeting, we presented the concept that many of our elementary schools would have to be split in half, K3 being in one building and 4-5 potentially being at a middle school. That has evolved over time, and now we are looking diligently at how we keep the majority of our students in their home site, pre-K through 5. However, there are exceptions. We know that there will be difficulty in doing that at Schuyler Achievement Academy, Sheridan Preparatory Academy, New Scotland Elementary School, and Delaware Community School. Our instructional considerations is where we've tried to find the most opportunity to use this time to really provide a different level of instruction that is targeted for our students, but also builds their capacity to work in what we're calling a flipped environment. Because the day would be split in half between a core teacher and a supervising adult, that core teacher time would be very focused on the priority standards and things that only a teacher would be able to support by providing feedback and helping students work through misconceptions, while the supervision time would be spent with what we would call student-led work that would help students build their background knowledge and information to support their learning with their classroom teacher. We continue to work through our staffing models to ensure that we have the most equity in how we provide staffing coverage, and that students are supported throughout the day by our certified teaching staff and teaching assistant staff where necessary to ensure a quality instructional model when they are on site. Our next steps continue to assess our building space in compliance with New York State Education Department regulations, where we're going to be splitting spaces in half to try to include more students, assessing our transportation needs, as well as developing professional development that will support our teachers in both the academics and the social emotional learning that will need to occur upon our return.
So good evening. I will take us into the middle school reentry framework. Our reentry task force has been working diligently over the last 7 weeks to develop 3 options for consideration, and will also provide parent choice. An in-person learning model, which is our regular middle school model with a traditional schedule and on-site every day. A hybrid model, which is 2 days on-site and 3 days of virtual learning. And then finally, an all virtual learning model where students will receive instruction remotely. In both the hybrid and all virtual model, there will be an enhanced academic rigor and accountability where a daily attendance protocol for the middle school model will be implemented, and it's currently being developed and includes taking attendance in all virtual classes as well as the on-site classes. In addition, students will complete a variety of formative and summative assessments, including benchmarks and unit tests. We will also look at other types of alternative assessments depending upon the content area, including essays that could be submitted online or projects or labs, just to name a few. Our middle school leaders have carefully evaluated the schools and instructional spaces within each of our middle schools while taking into consideration social distancing and 6 feet in between our desks. And based on our review, our middle school students and AIC students will be housed in 3 of our schools. It's a recommendation, and those include North Albany, Hackett, and Edmond J. O'Neill. The needs of all of our students were top priority when our team was developing our instructional model, and we were very thoughtful to include our students with disabilities, English language learners, students who are in need of reading and math interventions, as well as how we can best meet the needs of our students who are involved in our instrumental music program as an example. And so in our model, we have identified spaces through the 5-day rotation schedule to provide additional support to those groups of students that I just mentioned to ensure that they have a well-rounded academic and enrichment program. We are currently finalizing our master schedule, both for the hybrid and the virtual model, which takes into consideration the staffing needs of our middle school program for both the hybrid and the virtual model. Our next steps really focuses around the continuation of assessing our building spaces and transportation needs, finalizing the schedule for both the hybrid and virtual model, identifying the professional development and curriculum development needs for our teachers, as well as developing student and parent guides to best support students and families in transitioning to one of the 3 models for September.
Good evening, Board of Education. As Lori has just said, around the parent choice, parents will have a choice of the enriched virtual blended learning model that we are putting in place at the high school, or a strictly virtual learning model. In addition, if we were able to go back to school, we are prepared for that as well. In terms of enhanced academic rigor and accountability, we've really been focusing on that. We want to honor the master schedule and honor the classes that the students have chosen for this upcoming year through the scheduling process last year. And we are putting in place that schedule as we look to what we're doing. Accountability, we have assessment that we're considering very carefully. We will reconvene the grading committee to look at how we are doing assessment. We do use the eDoctrina, which is a very powerful web-based assessment platform. There may be a way to do some virtual assessments, as well as other more traditional kinds of assessments, such as essays, projects, etc. There also would be an opportunity for assessment to take place on campus. The building space is good. We have the room for the model that we have developed. We will probably be at about 50% occupancy. Our instructional considerations, of course, we started with students first. I had the pleasure last night of listening to students speak about their experience with the virtual learning in the spring. We learned some very good things there from them. They largely, they really miss their teachers and they miss being in school. So our instructional considerations is, as I said, we are going to honor the courses that the students have chosen. Students will have class 5 times in a 10-day cycle. So every other day they will be in the class that they have chosen. The way our model works is that it begins with a late start, a little bit of a late start, in order to have the common planning time and planning period first thing in the morning. That is followed by this advisory sort of what we're calling pod time, where students are 10 to 15, I'm sorry, 12 to 15 students are with one teacher. That teacher is actually one of their content teachers. We prioritized at grade 11 and 12, placing students with a specialty teacher that they have chosen. So for example, a review of schedules might show that a student is placed in 2 music classes, and we will make every endeavor to place that student in the advisory period with that music teacher. So they have opportunities in that advisory period to get more of the specialty class that they are seeking. We had a very nice, just another example, we had a very nice fit with CTE, the level 3 students for Brooklyn. We are able to place the students in those level 3 classes with a CTE advisory teacher. I think a good example is the CNA health students. I believe we have 24 or 26 students in that program. We have 2 health CNA teachers. There's the advisory period. Students will be having all their core courses in a virtual learning model. We are hoping to bring what our likely recommendation, we're still in planning stages. We are likely to bring in about 8 to 900 students every day. We'll do that by grade level. We'd like to bring in 9th grade twice a week and the other grade levels once a week. Special education self-contained students every day. TCCE program, which will be housed at Albany High, will have a staggered schedule, about 60 kids a day in that program so that they're 2 days on site. And our English language learners 2 days on site. And you might wonder about why we would want the kids to come when they are engaged in virtual learning. The reason for that is because sometimes students need that space to participate in their virtual learning. Additionally, we want to be able to provide support, guidance, modeling about learning in that virtual environment. And the other beauty of the model is how we can very easily get in and out of the schedule. If things were to improve, we could very easily transition to more in-person teaching, or we could very easily transition to a completely virtual environment. Staffing, we are looking at staff maintaining their regular 5-period schedule and teaching those classes, as I said, 5 times in a 10-day period. And then in addition, each staff member is assigned to 1 on-site advisory pod period, and they will have those 12 to 15 students. The purpose of this, the philosophy behind this, is so that every student has an adult, and that contact person can really make sure that the kids are staying up to date with the Google Classroom, with Google Meet. They can troubleshoot problems. They can interface with parents, and it's one teacher being responsible for 12 to 15 students instead of their entire caseload of 125. Now, that doesn't mean that they wouldn't have contact. It's just having this point person for every student at the high school. And as I said, parents can choose to have their students attend those days or choose a completely virtual learning environment. Our next steps is to have our committee meeting. We have probably a final committee meeting next week, maybe one more after that, where we're getting ready to make our recommendation. We have been through several iterations of the schedule and believe we have arrived at the best one for students. And we want to go through that process with our committee, finalize the schedule, and be ready to make our recommendation to the superintendent.
So thank you so very much for this beginning portion, and we do have more, but I did want to take a moment to say thank you to Dr. Cecily Wilson-Turner, to Lori McKenna, and to Karen Bechtel for leading that instructional component at the grade level piece. And just a reminder that no decisions have been finalized at this time. We have several options that are out on the table. I do want to make sure that it is clear that even as we are asking parents for their input about choice, it still depends on the capacity of what we're going to be able to do. And so we're trying to get a feel and an idea as to what our parents are thinking in terms of what type of model might best suit them as we look to make decisions after the governor's announcement on August 7th or August 6th. So at this time, I will turn the time over to Mr. Baker with regard to our instructional technology.
Thank you, Superintendent, and good evening, board members. Like my colleagues, I worked with a diverse group of stakeholders in pondering the challenges and also the options associated with the instructional technology program. And the discussion really kind of distilled down to 3 primary areas of consideration. And so I'll examine each one of those over the course of a few slides with you this evening. And like the others have stated many times over, this is a very fluid situation. So we are doing our best to design our framework to be as responsive as possible to potential outcomes as they're developed. So the first kind of bucket of consideration is around the devices and the access. And, you know, our goal has been for a long time to be one-to-one. We are not there. We have very accurate information at this time regarding the need as it exists. And at a high level kind of number, we were looking at about 5,000 devices to be fully whole in terms of one-to-one instructionally. That includes staff. I will keep reiterating that as well. So over this time, we have done many things to try to acquire enough devices to be one-to-one. And we are quite confident that we will be one-to-one as close to the beginning of the year as possible. But in the interim, we are not. So there are contingency plans, so to speak. And what I mean by that is we're prioritizing the devices that we do have in terms of deployment. So we're focusing on those areas that will be either wholly or predominantly remote learning situations. So grades 6 through 12 will be the first focal point for deployment of devices. We then work down and do what we can to provide reasonable and equitable access to those on-site locations, and that's primarily our K-5 population. And our instructional staff need is also thrown into the considerations as we're looking at, you know, a deficit model. Again, we hope this is temporary, but it is consideration right now and part of our existing framework. And when it comes to the deployment model, this is also quite fluid simply because of the unknowns that still do exist right now. We don't know about delivery dates in terms of those devices that we're looking to acquire. And we also have the challenge of supporting a remote summer school program, and our summer school program runs deep into August. So even if we're looking at needing to acquire or bring devices back, kind of process them to turn them around and redeploy to meet that 6 to 12 one-to-one, there are many dependencies in place there that make that a fluid situation. But we do have models developed right now that will allow us to, I think, rely heavily on decentralization, which is really efficient. We discovered that over the course of our initial deployment. And the next area then is the actual instruction itself, and that's broader than just the teaching and learning. It's the technology pieces, it's the capacity to use the technology, and then it's also the protections and those considerations to do it responsibly. So a lot on this slide, and I'll try to sum it up succinctly for you. So we're looking at recognizing our help desk now as a help desk, not only for our staff, which is what it has been primarily day-to-day for as long as it's existed. We are now a support staff for our students and their families as well. So we've reallocated some of our personnel to be the public-facing part of our help desk and to understand some of the challenges now that are presented as we've been involved in this remote instruction environment for some time, and we are seeing efficiencies there. We have also done, I think, a really good job of partnering up with some of the instructional side of the house to also serve as consultants to our help desk staff, because again, we've got this real intersection now of technology and instruction. And so, you know, our technical staff is doing a great job of acquiring knowledge about instructional spaces and design. and methods, but that's not their game. So we are working with others on the instructional side to provide that meaningful support to folks when they call our help desk from the outside. You know, the other part of capacity is also our teaching staff, and I could spend another 20 minutes talking about the Herculean effort and the amazing work they did in a very short time to stand up remote instruction and be very successful at it, but there's still a lot left for us to do in terms of building their capacity. So we are right now working on onboarding a number of instructional technology coaches through a grant opportunity. It will be a part-time endeavor. However, I expect it to be extremely successful in terms of that, you know, the turnkey method where folks get to work with their peers, and it will take the form of formal group sessions as well as a lot of embedded work directly with staff members, which is the most effective type. And, you know, this intersection of technology and instruction is really our new frontier, and we're making a lemonade out of it because it's a great opportunity for us to really shift instructional design in a broader way, as opposed to just being reactive to a virtual need at this point. And then the last piece really is around the governance and data and security. And the board will recall that even prior to this situation, you know, we were working as a district very diligently toward hardening our security posture overall and doing a lot of things to ensure the integrity of our network and the accounts and the data that we protect and work on behalf of our staff, students every single day. And, you know, it wasn't just compliance with Ed Law 2D and the Commissioner's Part 121 regulations, which greatly enhanced need for security. It was really a desire that's been around for 3 years. My cabinet colleagues will tell you, I was talking about it when I came back 3 years ago, so we're getting there. So what I think the real important part here is to note, we are truly now being vigilant about the resources that are going to be used. We're getting economy of scale by using common resources as well. We're ensuring compliance with all these state and federal regulations that are extremely important as we look at protecting our students and our staff from dangers and from privacy breaches. And then the last kind of group of considerations are operational, and I like to label these as the transparent things that you don't even think about technology touching, but in fact, technology is the underpinning framework for all of them. So to start, you know, this will be dictated, the first goal will be dictated a lot by the business rules we put together when we define what attendance looks like. But once that is known, we will have to figure out how to program that in our systems to actually record that virtual attendance. So things like attendance and other grade related actions that take place in our information system are considerations. We also are certainly going to have to look at how we can engage students in some form of our interval assessment program this year. That's been made known. We don't know the status of state assessments yet, but we know we're going to have to do something with our interval or internal assessment program, and that resides squarely with my team as well. And scheduling has been brought up a number of times, and it's, I think conceptually, it's hard to deal with even on the surface, let alone those considerations we have, because as of yet, we have no waivers or relief from reporting mandates, and we have to account for every single instructional linkage formally so that it can be reported to the state. And that's the teacher, the student, the when, the where, the how long. So when you're looking at these scheduling models that are so fluid and so much different than a typical formal schedule, those challenges are real and incredible, but we're keeping up with the conversations that are going on the instructional side of the house. And so I think we're going to be okay in terms of programming that and linking those formal instructional requirements. However, we're also equally attentive to those non-instructional groupings, which are very important for the logistics of how our business and our education system will function in the hybrid model. And, you know, another thing physically now is equipping these non-traditional spaces. As you know, every part of every building is going to be used somehow instructionally, and we're talking about how to put display and other technology in cafeterias and side halls and things of that nature. So a whole host of considerations and challenges when it comes to getting technology in spaces that typically haven't had it. And then, you know, I wouldn't even call it, it's not tangential, it's extremely important, the notion of health and hygiene and sanitization of devices, particularly if there's going to be any common use of devices. So, what kinds of products are appropriate for electronics and what are the recommended schedules and intervals. So those are also considerations that we've been discussing. And rather than next steps, I've characterized this as the major unknowns. And I know we all have them, but for me and the work my team is doing, once some of these are established, it'll help us to really put a foot in the ground and then go downfield a little bit. So the status of our investment plan, our Chromebook acquisition, I think I can tell you confidently now that we're not so much tied to the status of the Smart Schools plan. We're going to figure out how to acquire the Chromebooks. So I think we can almost check that one off. The occupancy scenario that the governor provides for us at this point, as you know, we're planning for many different models and assuming school will be open, but what if it's not open at all to start the year? That occupancy scenario will also do a lot in determining how we go and implement or operationalize our deployment structure. And I hearkened a few minutes ago, but the hope that I still hold that we will get some relief from or modifications of those requirements for data warehouse reporting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Baker. Ms. Roaring will speak to us with regard to food service and food and nutrition.
Good evening, Board of Education. I want to acknowledge that our Director of Food Service, Ms. Finkenbeiner, has been instrumental in leading the work with this particular subcommittee, and I hope to summarize that tonight on her behalf. When we look at food and nutrition, we know that there's several things that we need to be considering in meals and how they're supervised in a non-congregated setting, making sure we're responsive to any food allergies of children, particularly when they're served on site, whether or not how we address the equipment and resources of staff that would be necessary in the various models that we'll share out with you this evening. Our options that we're looking at right now are cafeteria service with dining, cafeteria service with classroom dining, classroom service with classroom dining, and I'm having a hard time seeing the presentation. When we look off-site meals, due to USDA waivers, we know we have the option to do a grab and go, curbside pickup and delivery, and we're currently still assessing all of these for feasibility. There may be hybrid models where students are on site part of the time and off-site part of the time. So how we continue to meet that need when they're not there. Would it be bulk grab and go on the last day that they're in session with us? What might that look like? And then continuing to work with Wixons, our food service provider partner, on what those options can be. When we look at our elementary students, if they were on site daily, we would look at a breakfast grab and go for our grades 1 through 5 or 6, depending on the building. They would pick up their meal as they entered and eat it in the classroom. Breakfast after the bell for our youngest students, and self-contained if that's desired. And most likely leaning towards some sort of lunch classroom service dining options, and looking at how we can implement that within the instructional models that are being developed under Dr. Wilson Turner's leadership. On-site versus virtual is making sure that we have the options that are necessary and are able to get meals home on the days the child may not be in school. And then determining the criteria for how we do that off-site. Is it only if they request it? Is it opt-out? Or do they automatically receive that? Secondary grade levels. If the students are on site daily, again, it's grab and go for them upon entry. Looking at staggered start times to decrease the crowding. Would lunch be traditional service with dining, or maybe small groups, or would that also be in classroom service as we're looking at the younger grades? And then how do we order and track? On-site and virtual learning, again, would be options as we've outlined above for the times that they're in school. Then looking at how we do take-home meals, whether it's bulk or single day. If they're working a half-day model, do we provide breakfast that afternoon for the next morning? Or if they're leaving us before lunch, do we send them home with lunch and serve breakfast in the morning? So there's still a lot of things that we're looking at, and some of it is making sure that we're able to be agile based on the model that we're functioning at any point in time during the next year. If all of our students are doing virtual learning, we would look to, that would be full closure. So then it's looking at the access for those virtual learners. It is a mandatory requirement. So we would look at how we can continue to provide that service. This spring, we were able to get a number of waivers that allowed us to do grab and go as well as meal delivery. and whether or not those same options would be available to us. Then looking at how we do that, if it's bulk or if it's one day at a time, and make sure that we're continuing to figure out how to best meet the needs of the students while providing some meal variety to them.
So one of the things that we cannot forget about is transportation. And so I know that Mr. Lesko has been working with INHO, our new director of transportation, very closely. And so Mr. Lesko will share a couple of highlights from transportation.
Thank you, Superintendent Adams, and good evening, everyone. Ownership of our rotation in HOSU. In alignment with Dr. Wilson Turner, Ms. McKenna, and their teams as we plan for our students' academic needs, to look at how we can serve our students from a transportation perspective in the new year. First Student serves our elementary students and our students with special needs. Followed by buses for students at a maximum capacity of 50% in the new year. This would be per seat on all large buses, and students from the same household would be allowed to sit 2 to a seat. That would give us a total capacity appropriate social distancing protocols on our buses serving students with special needs. We're considering a limited capacity of as few as 4 students on a small bus and 1 student on a wheelchair bus. Our maximum seating on a small bus serving students with special needs would be 10, and that would be dependent on all of those students being medically able to wear a mask or other appropriate face covering. All students and employees on all First Student buses would be required to wear a mask or other face covering unless there is an underlying medical condition. All of our buses will be cleaned and sanitized in alignment with CDC guidance. Drivers will wipe down all high-touch areas after each run, and First Student also will implement an additional daily deep cleaning protocol for all buses. And we had a good conversation with them about that this week, and we are satisfied that they've identified a very good product and a good process for doing that each day. Oops, did I just? Can you still hear me? I might have muted. Did I mute?
We can hear you.
And then I just muted and unmuted twice. CDTA serves our secondary students at the middle school and high school level. They are currently planning to limit ridership on Tripper and all regular service buses to a maximum of 20, and that's where they are currently, and they are, as everyone else is, planning and evaluating the guidance and waiting for additional guidance. On a Tripper bus, approximately 1/3 of the capacity on a Tripper, and middle school and high school students who are use ID card to ride any CDTA bus, and while CDTA guidance that is in alignment with Governor Cuomo's executive order requiring masks of the following guidance from the Department of Health and CDC.
Ms. Lesko,
A hospital grade sanitizing agent.
We're finding your audio is cutting in and out quite a bit. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but I am finding the audio from you to be pretty choppy. So I'm not sure if there's anything that is critical that you want to make sure that it's heard, or how to handle it, because it does seem to be affecting you much more than any other speaker.
I'm leaning in, and we'll see how that works.
Thank you.
Okay, I apologize for that. Bus operators have access to masks, disposable gloves, and sanitizing wipes to do additional wipe downs in their area, which they will do regularly. And CDTA has deployed cleaners in the field, and they'll be doing wipe downs of buses at layover areas multiple times on a daily basis.
So thank you, Mr. Lesko. And just to wrap up, I know this has been quite a bit of time spent on this intro with our information, but we have had so much work that's been done with regard to the reopening. We wanted to make sure that we were definitely informing the board, but an opportunity to formally share out some of this information with our public. We will attach to board docs to this meeting and this presentation all of the presentations from the town hall meetings, as well as the student PowerPoints and the parent meetings. We will have that posted as well. You can see the numbers. We've talked about how many people have participated. There were 9 major categories that we looked at. We did provide you with the frequently asked questions that are listed there. We will have the responses to those particular questions also posted, so that will be there for the reference of the public. In addition, we wanted to make sure that there were some important dates. We do have our final town hall forum, reopening forum on the 28th. That is for the middle school students at 4 o'clock, and then the parents, guardians, and community members at 6. On July 31st, it is the final day for New York school districts to submit opening plans to the state. I do have to say that on the 29th, while it's not listed there, we are doing a reopening forum with our elementary, middle, and high school faculty and staff. And there will be 3 different meetings, and that is for faculty and staff so that they can give input. And then any adjustments that we need to make, we will make them. We know that we will make additional adjustments once we hear from the governor during the week of August 1st through the 7th. Then we'll be able to make some additional adjustments, but at least we have all of the input so that we can go ahead and start making those adjustments. We do have August 13th and 27th, our board meetings, and then September 8th is currently scheduled as our first day of school for the 2021 school year. So at this time, thank you so very much, board, for giving us this time to completely share what we've done and where we're headed and what next week looks like. Thank you so very much.
So as we go into the time for questions, Mr. Baker, could you scroll all the way back to the original agenda for the presentation? Because I think that's a nice agenda for us to follow for questions. I think it was on slide 4.
Slide 4.
I am deferring to Ms. Bowie, who is driving this evening.
Ms. Bowie. There, slide 4 lists the order that this presentation was given in, which was first general guidance, then elementary, then secondary, then instructional technology, food and nutrition, maintenance and operations, and transportation. And I think rather than just having people ask random questions all over the board, to kind of consolidate the questions by topic, I'd like to go through this by topic. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that there are 7 topics and 7 of us. So even if we each only asked 1 question about each topic, that would be 49 questions, which is a lot of questions. And I think we want to avoid that in part because the superintendent and her staff have provided so many opportunities for people to ask questions. So I'm going to ask each of you to kind of focus in your mind on what your top 2 or 3 questions are, no matter which category they fall in. So we'll go through the presentation in this order for questions, but I'm going to encourage people to only ask a question on 1 or 2 or at most 3 areas. And as usual, I'm going to encourage us to do this respectfully. Each person asks a question and then doesn't ask 2 or 3 more questions before somebody else gets to ask 1. So with that introduction, let's try using our hand raising button on Teams. And could you hit your hand raise button if you have a question that you think falls in the general guidance category? And we'll go through those first. Ms. Smith, would you like to be first?
Sure thing. First of all, a comment. I want to just express how grateful I am for this very detailed plan, and even though I know there are many adjustments to come, perhaps it is really quite thorough. And I also want to say I really appreciate that we are taking out so much time to get input from our, youngsters, from our faculty, from the community. Staff is just tremendous. So kudos there. I just had a general question. I have had a number of individuals and a few businesses that have approached me saying, how can we help? And so, Superintendent, I don't know if we have a point of contact for this right now, but I don't want to be the one saying, oh, well, we need this, we need that. I'd rather figure out some system with you for channeling those people directly to your office. And we can certainly talk offline, but I thought if there was something you could communicate to the public now, that would be great.
So at this juncture, we have our presentations out and people are seeing areas where they can really support. We ask that information come into the superintendent's office. It can be emailed directly to me, or it can be emailed into our board clerk. That would be fine. Either of those two ways would be fine.
Thank you.
So I have a general guidance question. First of all, I just want to make sure that I'm fully understanding and that we're stating very explicitly for members of the community so that they fully understand that we are required, and I'm just making sure I've got this, that we're required to provide both a full in-person and a full virtual and this in-between thing, that has to be the context of our plan that we are submitting to the governor and the New York State Education Department. But that the hybrid plan is the most complicated, obviously, so that's why we're spending so much time on it. But that's not the only plan we're submitting, correct?
That is correct. That is absolutely correct.
And you've said this before, but again, I'm just trying to lay it out there in very short words so that everybody's got it, that assuming that when we get close to school, we are allowed to do some in-person school, which will depend on the rates and the governor's guidance around that, we are anticipating providing an option that parents may elect to do 100% virtual school that they could elect for their child based on what they perceive their child's best interests. That's right?
Yes, there will be a virtual component. Yes.
Okay, and it'll be a parent choice virtual component, yes, not a district choice virtual component. Okay, I thought I understood all that. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing it because we are spending a lot of time on the in-person component, but of course the virtual component may in fact be a larger percentage of our education depending on what our COVID numbers look like as we get close to school.
That's correct. And it also depends on the capacity of what we're able to do, how we're able to structure things. So there are still components to that, but so one of the reasons that we're spending so much time on this hybrid model is because there's several things that we already have in place. So if we are to go completely virtual, we've already done that. So we are working on how do we tweak that? So that basic structure is there. We're looking at enhancing that. If we look at fully coming back with social distancing, we can manage some of that. And so that lift is also another lift, but it doesn't require so much of the out of the box thinking that a hybrid model would be. If we have to consider that, because what we're looking at in that hybrid model is we have reduced numbers of students coming to school. We have to look at the transportation impact. I mean, there are just so many unknowns with that, which is why we have spent quite a bit of time on that, because that's where most of the unknowns were. So I want to make sure that that's clear.
I understand. I see no further hands raised unless the tool is acting up. I believe that there's no more questions on the general category. Sridhar, you've got a hand raised, or Mr. Elmanyabi, you've got a hand raised. Is that on elementary or on general?
Elementary.
Okay, so let's do Dr. Chatoor, since you're already on, let's do you first.
So this question is elementary, but it's also related to transportation. Since part of the consideration is to move some of the schools to Myers, that changes the logistics of your neighborhood school, and kids who might have walked to school might need transportation. Kids who needed transportation may not need transportation. So I know in the survey, one of the things was you were asking parents of, are you planning to be on site or not? Is there any other survey or something that's going to be done with respect to transportation as to Do you need transportation? Are you going to transport your own kids? Because some people may not want to take the school bus, even though they might need transportation, and vice versa.
Yes, is the answer to that question. We actually had a conversation about that in our cabinet meeting this week, trying to gauge families' desire for full virtual instruction, or families who are going to be interested in sending their students to school. And our primary reason for that conversation was elementary transportation. That's where our biggest challenge is from a transportation perspective right now, simply because of a capacity issue. The strong desire of the district is to have all of our elementary students in school every day, again, given the parent choice option. And we're trying to do everything we can to make that a reality from a transportation perspective. And yes, gathering some additional feedback like that from our families to try and determine as best we can what percentage of families might be interested in beginning the school in a fully virtual environment, and what percentage of our families might be interested in their students returning to school in whatever format that we put together to begin the year.
Thank you for that information. And I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. You know, the effort that has gone into, I've attended both forums in the elementary and the secondary level, and the effort that goes to these few bullet points that we see on a slide is just amazing. All the work that has gone on the background. So kudos to the staff.
So anyone else who has a question that's arguably an elementary question that they would like to ask now? Mr. Elmanyawi, your hand was up. Do you want to use this as a jumping off point for elementary, or do you want to hold your question? Mr. Elmanyawi, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. You're muted, I think.
I double clicked the mute. Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Okay. So it kind of straddles general guidance in elementary, secondary considerations. Is there a critical mass, so to speak? I understand that we sent out a survey to parents regarding whether they would be comfortable doing in-person learning or the virtual learning, but if there's a certain tipping point, so it would become less, would not make sense to do either. So if there's more people that wanted to do in-person learning than virtual learning, or vice versa, that might be kind of too broad or overarching of a question, but I'm just kind of wondering if we have an understanding whether the critical mass for either of those.
Absolutely. You are absolutely on the right track with what our thought process is, and that's why we're gathering that information. What that tipping point is right now, we don't know. But as we look at what our capacity might be and the facility constraints that we might have, looking at the different models that we have, absolutely, there may be a point where as an organization, we can't support one model over another based on the feedback that we get. And so you are exactly on point, because that is exactly why we're taking that information so that it can help to impact the decisions that we make and help us make the most effective decisions.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt with a follow-up question. I'm hearing two different things, and I just want to make sure that they might be, see if what I'm hearing is right, that there's two different things. There's survey information, trying to get a temperature check on what parents might like to do, what they're thinking about. And then there's, at some point, going to be an election of choice when we get closer. Am I right about that? That there's going to be two different things? Okay. That's very helpful for me to understand that. Mr. Elmanyawi, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you get your question answered?
No, that's the answer was yeah. The question was answered. I just was trying to see if that was the right direction, or that that's what you guys were thinking. So yeah.
I have to admit I have a million questions because I always do, but I'm given the interest of time, I'm not going to ask any more questions on elementary. Does anyone else have an elementary question, or can we move to secondary? All right, who has question? Mr. Emanyawi, I'm not sure if your hand is intentionally still up because you have a secondary question or if you just are stuck with it up. But I'll give the next question to Ms. Krejci since she raised her hand on secondary, and we'll wait to see what happens with your hand.
I just had a quick question on secondary, and it was, I seem to have heard Ms. McKenna say something about there was an option where we're looking at having the middle school students in school all day, every day, and I was wondering, is that something that we're able to do with social distancing?
So at the middle level, we're looking at the majority of our 6th through 8th grade students on site 2 days per week and 3 days virtual. All of our self-contained special education students in grades 6 through 8, actually K through 12, will be on site every single day. And our students in grades 6 through 12 that attend AIC will also be on site every day, 5 days per week. We are also proposing that some of our other at-risk groups that don't fit into those categories, such as our Tier 3 reading and math students who need interventions, will attend a 3rd day, as well as our English language learners who are not a part of the AIC, but would benefit from a 3rd day of on-site instruction. So not all students in grades 6 through 8 will attend every day. It's a subset of that population, with some students getting a 3rd day of full day instruction should that model move forward.
Thank you, that's helpful.
You're welcome.
So my my secondary question, and again, we're talking here just like you were a minute ago, Ms. McKenna, about the hybrid model, right? I mean, there is an in-person model. We just don't expect to get there with our COVID numbers.
That is correct.
Right. Okay. So my question is a secondary question about the high school plan. Like Dr. Chatoor, I've really benefited from listening to the parent forums for the elementary and the high school, and I really appreciate the effort that went into those. I think they were terrific, and I loved the way the chat function allowed parents to really ask the questions that they had. And one of the things, I guess it's sort of a two-part question, and it's about what Ms. Bechtel explained about the pods and how that will really work. And my two-part question is, one, can you help me understand how that meshes with what you've said about hands-on instruction for labs, art, band? I'm still not understanding, if I were a kid, what would happen. Like you said, I would have a late start, I would go to my pod, but you've also said I would have band or whatever. So that's the part one. And then the second part, which is sort of integrated into it, is you've also talked about honoring the master schedule and honoring the need for teachers to be with their students. But I'm hearing that they're only going to see face-to-face one of their core non-hands-on class teachers in a face-to-face environment. And I'm wondering if that's my understanding about that's correct. And if so, sort of what thought process led you there rather than to a spot where there'd be more in-person teaching for more classes per kid? Because I think that's what most kids think about when they think about going to school, is getting that face-to-face instruction. So I'm sorry if that was complicated. It may be that I just don't really understand the pod model, but I do want to understand how we moved away from face-to-face instruction as the primary thing happening in the school building.
So it's a matter of providing a structure schedule, and also a structured schedule that allows for flexibility. And we have really been working on that since we started meeting in June. And we have, as I said, we have gone through many iterations, because we could have prioritized perhaps those core classes for on-site instruction, but then we would have struggled to provide access perhaps to those specialty classes that, even according to the kids that we met with yesterday, provides them with the motivation sometimes to really want to be at the high school. And so we have been as I said, really struggling and striving to arrive at enough flexibility to get to what the kids need and want, and also enough structure that we can support given social distancing and those rules. And the cohort model of the 12 to 15 students is about social distancing and trying to maintain that social distancing. And when we tried to think about how we could have high school kids in the high school sort of running through their schedule and transitioning from class to class, even if we only let them come in every day, or I'm sorry, if we only let them come in every other day, or we split their schedule, they would still end up with contact with, upwards of 200 kids when they would go through 5 classes. And so, or actually their full 9 period day. And we were trying, as I said, to keep that in mind. And yet our schedule at Albany High is a complex one, because as the board knows, we try to offer kids all sorts of different opportunities. So to try to take it down to the more in-person model, we would have had to prioritize. And if we had to prioritize, we would probably prioritize the cores. And then, so we went round and round. So the pod advisory model is really that is really our next step of the work. We think that we have the schedule. As I said, no decisions have been made, and I will be meeting with our high school committee on Monday. So I want to make sure I preface that with this. But the idea is that you do have these cohorts, and they will stay and do a day of virtual learning. It's, they have access, but during this pod advisory time is a time when every teacher is free. And so they can reach out to them. They could be sitting in a Google Meet, and they could reach out to them to get extra help or tutoring, ask a question. And ultimately what we're trying to figure out is how can we make that pod advisory period work for those hands-on courses, art, music, technology, CTE, and that's what we're trying to do. So what we're thinking is that there'll be 2 avenues the more we can open up. And what Principal Comerford would like to do in regards to the hands-on is we want to do a little phase-in to see how that will work. But what we're thinking is that you could either access during, like, for example, if the art teacher says, I want to have the art students down to my class, she could use her period time, her period 2 class. She could say, hey guys, I want half of you guys to come down to the art room on Tuesday, and I'm going to see the other half of you guys when you're in the building, whatever next time you are, whatever grade level it might be. And we think we can maneuver that when the students are on site. Now the issue is then we're mixing kids again. So we're trying to figure out how we can manage that. So we want to get the kids in school. We want to see how things go and how the community is going with the COVID-19. And then we're hoping that we'll be able to open that up so that students can access those things. Meanwhile, if you're in that specialty class, you should be with that specialty teacher if you're an 11th or 12th grader. We've prioritized the cores for 9th and 10th grade. So I hope that's a little clearer. It is a complex model.
I understand it so much better now. The piece I'm still not quite understanding is the virtual piece of it, where you're doing distance learning. Is that going to follow something that is like a student's traditional schedule with a locked in time, and they're going to have English on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9, or whatever the schedule is, as opposed to what we did this past time, where we had these blocks? So if a kid is enrolled in, let's say, CTE, they do auto mechanics at a certain time. That's not probably a good example. Let me stick with things that are not hands-on. If they have English 9 and they have AP World, they will have a schedule of English 9 is at this time, AP World is at that time, and somebody else might have a different schedule. Am I saying it right?
Yes. Yes, and that was where we think we had to get to, because we looked at a semester model, we looked at all sorts of things. But what we came to the conclusion is that we would have, there could, the potential for confusion and overlap. And that's, the students that we met yesterday actually said that in the spring, we had one student who took 2 science classes, and so she found herself with one science block to access, and that didn't work. So it is actually what I think what we're going to do, we hope, and no decisions have been made, is sort of run periods 1 through 4 on a Monday and periods 5 through 9 on a Tuesday. That's the A day, and then that's A day, and then B day, again, periods 1 through 4, 6 through 9, and that's why we need the 10-day schedule. And then students will have 5 classes in a 10-day period, and they will be with their teachers. We're hoping too that we use Google Meet more efficiently and effectively because the live instruction is important, and videos and things of that nature. So that's one of the reasons that we want the kids to come on campus, is to see how it goes and to model how virtual learning works so that they can be the most successful. So I think that's it in a nutshell.
That was very helpful. I understand it certainly better than I did before, although I know not all decisions have been made, so I think I understand it to the point that it could be understood. Ms.
For
Smith,
tonight.
Yeah, for tonight at least. Ms. Smith, your hand is up. Is that on secondary?
Yes, it is. My question is just a follow up to Ms. Savage's. Will there be recorded classes, however, and also will there be a recording of the live classes for later look back or access?
We would like to do that.
I'm sorry, I'll chime in on that. Some of the recording of classes we have to look at because there are specific guidelines and legal things that we have to really look at. We have to look at FERPA. We have to, there are other components than just videotaping the class and posting it. And so I would say that there are more details to work out with that.
Yes, thank you. And I really didn't want to get in the weeds on that. It was, this approach is so new, and I even know with some of the college courses that I took that were virtual, there was a way that I could actually go back to that class to access the content. And so I just wanted to know if that was something we were thinking of. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised for secondary. Oh, Mr. El-Minyawi, is this a secondary question?
Yes. So I didn't hear anything about like testing or how that would be conducted in the presentation.
Are you speaking of regular testing in a class?
Regular old like
high stakes testing.
Tests, exactly.
That could be the instructional, so that's part of what we're going to do when we bring our teachers together based on, the different models that we have, looking at what assessments might be and how they're going to conduct those online. There are lots of models at university levels and different schools that are online schools with regard to in-class assessments and how you do that. And so those are things that our teachers will be working on with the help of our coaches and instructional supervisors.
Okay, so we're looking at testing through forums online, for example, or
depending on the model, yes. If we are 100% virtual, then there would be some type of virtual assessment that students would take. They would either do it and then submit it to their teacher, or it may be an online assessment. So there are different venues by which they can do that.
Okay, and not to hog the mic or anything, but same with homework. So I'm assuming that we don't want to have papers turned into the teacher as little as possible, basically. So
those are the details. Those are the details that teachers would have to work out as we go through those discussions.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
President Savage, you're muted.
So I am. Dr. Tutor, did you have a question about secondary?
Not secondary, it was more on the instructional technology.
Are we ready to move on? I don't see anybody else's hand up, so let's assume we're ready to move on. Go ahead.
So with respect to attendance, and especially now, for example, the secondary school where the tripper buses are only going to be running at 1/3 capacity, kids might be late getting to school. So is there some way of feedback to the parents and making sure, in fact, even for the elementary kids, I know we have school tool for the older kids. Is there an option to use school tool even for the younger kids? So there's more feedback to the parents in terms of, yes, your kids attended this class, or you submitted this report, or things for them to monitor closely.
School tool portal accounts are available for parents of students in pre-K through 12. So the simple answer to that question is yes, school tool can be used as a communication vehicle for all of our students and their families. And there are, I think you point out one use case, and there are probably others if we're looking at just a mechanism for alerts and things of general notice. I just want to continue to point out with school tool that it is primarily geared around structured instruction and feedback related to assignments and grading and those things. Not to say that the other messages aren't a possibility. It's just a matter of a staff member taking on that overhead of using that tool. But the answer is yes, it can be used by any parent of any student.
Okay.
Anyone else with a technology question? Not seeing any hands, I'm just going to insert our appreciation again for the quick shift and being able to get us very close to one-on-one for secondary for the beginning of school for next year. It is, I think, essential for especially what Ms. Beckdahl described, which is a much more emphasis on synchronous learning. It's going to be essential that we have all of that tech for our kids, so thank you. Anyone with a question on food and nutrition? That was spelled out in a lot of detail, so there may not be questions there. How about on maintenance and operations? Mr. Almanyawi. Let's see, Mr. Almanyawi, you haven't gotten off of mute, so maybe I could have Miss Wilson. She had a question or a comment, and then you. Oh, there you are.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just talking. I was talking to myself. So this came to mind when I got disconnected. Hello?
You're good.
Hello?
We can hear you.
That's really weird because I couldn't hear anything.
We can hear you now.
And the screen went blank.
I'm also seeing a blank screen.
This idea or this question came about when. Okay. This question came about when someone had mentioned that they were given a stagger lunch. Kind of had the same thought that maybe drop-off should also be staggered. Is that? I know that's a few other topics, but.
You mean the drop-off?
Right, because I mean, correct.
Okay, so that's those are some of the options that we're looking at. Do we need to have a staggered arrival time for students? How does that work with a staggered dismissal? Does it intersect with food services? And then when you tie it into maintenance and operations, if there's a staggered time frame whereby students are arriving at different times, and let's say they're using the same space, do we have enough time between the first group using it and the second group using it so that we can clean and sanitize that space in the most efficient manner in alignment with DOH guidelines?
I bring it up because I know in the morning at Ash, it's packed when everyone's dropping their kids off at the same time. And I know it would be lesser a less amount of students coming in, but I would still imagine there'd be some kind of too many folks at the door, basically. Just a thought. Thank you.
One of the considerations has been that multiple entries might be used, and then there's a designated space where they go in, and then you do that screening at each of those entrances. That's one of the pieces that was talked about in both of the presentations at the elementary level and the high school level. I know it's part of the middle school piece as well.
No, I appreciate that you mentioned that, because I actually wrote that down, but I didn't want to get too specific. So thank you.
Anybody else with a maintenance and operations question? I guess the one that I have, which I know many people are asking in the community, and I think it's one that's just on everybody's mind, is the possibility of subs. Do we have enough subs? At what's that tipping point between staying open and trying to fill gaps with subs if in fact we do have people not necessarily sick but quarantined, right? Somebody's husband has COVID, or somebody's wife has COVID, and so then they're under quarantine. So suddenly we have a higher need for subs than we've ever had before. Have we run some scenarios, either actual scenarios or at least sort of thought process about what that might look like and whether we actually will be able to maintain school?
So we've looked at the anecdotal scenarios, but we've not run any actual scenarios. In terms of our subs, we already know that on a regular basis that we have a shortage of subs, and many times we may not be able to fill classes. So just based on that knowledge, we know that that's going to present some challenges as we move forward. And so HR will be working with our instruction unit to see what that's going to look like in terms of how we look at our subs, because here's the other component that we have to add the layer to. If I have a substitute that has gone to 3 or 4 different campuses, now we are enhancing the contamination, if you will, just because of that sheer exposure. So then what does it look like to have, several subs that are only assigned to a particular building? Those kinds of considerations we have definitely thought about, but we still have not worked through those details.
And I assume, since you're thinking about it, that there'll be some special sub training, because they're going to need to learn all of the social distancing and hand washing requirements that the teachers are going to have to learn, and they're not working for us every day. So you don't need to respond to that. I just know that it's a big thing. Okay. Anybody else on maintenance and operations? Anything in that category? Otherwise, we'll move on to transportation, which was also done while Mr. Lesko was breaking up. I think there was a lot of detail provided there, as much as you can under the circumstances. Okay, anybody with a final question that either didn't fit into that category or a comment that they feel like they wanted to make? In particular, I'm going to call out Ms. Wilson and Ms. Krejci, who neither one of which took the opportunity throughout the presentation. Did either of you have something you wanted to add at this point?
I did ask a question about secondary, and I'm okay. I don't have any additional questions.
My notes were faulty. Thank you, Ellen. Tabitha, did you have something you wanted to add? Otherwise, Mr. Elmanyawi?
I really appreciated this entire presentation. It was very detailed. I guess I kind of have the other side view right now, where do we have a slowdown procedure where someone is identified as having COVID and a student or a teacher was infected,
So it was a little broken, but I think the gist of the question is if we have someone who tests positive for COVID-19 once we are back in school, however model we have, do we have something in place or do we know what those procedures are going to be? At this juncture, the more specific details in terms of what determines if we close down, if we only have a class not show, or if, provided we are in person in any form or fashion, all of those guidelines have to come forward. That was one of the questions as well from one of the parent forums. That decision is not a school district decision. It is done via the guidance of Department of Health. You also have other decisions that are made with regard to those percentages that the governor has talked about, that if we stay at a certain percentage, then we would be permitted to remain open. If it drops below a certain percentage or escalates above a certain percentage, then we would have to go into a shutdown mode, if you will, or a virtual learning mode. But those details have not been clearly outlined for us yet.
Okay, Ms.
Thank
Wilson.
you.
Oh, Ms. Wilson. Okay, you're not muted, but we can't hear you. Why is that? Aha.
So yes, I don't have a categorical topic question. It was more philosophical that the intersection between the pandemic, education, and socioeconomics really, I know that some students will be very hard hit coming back into school from the break and things of that nature, and just about the social emotional support that we'll have for them. And I do know that there's other philosophical elements of some schools, even at the end of their school year, had suspended grading, for example, and I appreciate that we didn't because there was an element of measurement and assessment that goes into that. But just because there's such a socioeconomic divide and technological divide for many students, I wanted to sort of delve into that realm because I do know that this is still, like you've always underscored, very continually evolving, but I did want to sort of touch on that aspect of things.
Thank you very much for that. We do have, for the social emotional piece, each level has that component which is explicitly going to be addressed with our students, regardless of socioeconomics, regardless of achievement level, regardless of anything. We do have a social emotional component looking at that well-being of our students, where we engage all of them in the wraparound services at different levels and differentiated, of course, to meet their needs. But each level has a component of social emotional well-being. When we talk about the academic rigor, that's one of the things that we are putting forward through our instructional supervisors, our coaches, and groups of teachers working together on what are we doing to scaffold that instruction so that any of the gaps that we may see, looking at our standards-based lessons, looking at standards-based instruction, what are some of the gaps that we may see from the spring that we need to embed in that instruction while we're still pushing and moving forward. So that's a delicate balance, because a third grader is not going to have third grade again. They're going to fourth grade, but there will still be gaps. So how do we take some of those standards where there may have been gaps and embed them in what we're doing in the fourth grade in order to keep the student moving forward? So that's that curriculum work that needs to happen, that we are working with, again, our instructional supervisors, coaches, and teachers on what that looks like in scaffolding that instruction to minimize those gaps. And we know that we're going to see those gaps, but we have to have that structure in place to help minimize that.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith, did you have a final comment?
Yes, and Ms. Wilson, thank you very much for that question. I was headed in that direction, and Superintendent, appreciate that response as well. I wanted to just back on staffing, and I don't remember if you actually said this because I was before, but I'm thinking that, you know, we may find more, it's on subs, I guess, but maybe not. But we'll probably find, you know, a lot of folks that have colds and things like that that probably shouldn't even come into the building even under those circumstances, right? But I'm wondering, do we have that ability for those individuals to continue their work, their teaching, their instruction, whatever it might be, remotely? Is there a plan for staff who may need to be out because of health reasons?
So we do understand that there may be health concerns that would need to be addressed. What those specific plans are, no, we don't have those in place, but we are looking at that because we do know that there may be some medical conditions, just as with our students, there may be medical conditions that we need to address.
So my very last kind of closing comment, I wanted to, as several people did, echo what several people said about the process that you've gone through. It's obvious the depth of work and the effort of putting together solid committees and having a lot of input from all up and down the system, and then the parent input. It's been, you know, really great, and the use of Microsoft Teams to collect those questions I thought was really terrific. It was great that we were able to make that happen, and I'm looking forward to seeing the middle school one next week. But my question is really for our community members, because they're all processing this practically like this week, right? Because you all have been working on it for several weeks, but they really saw it for the first time Tuesday for elementary, last night for high school, and have not yet even seen the middle school in that level of detail. So what mechanism do you want people to use to provide additional questions or input? Do you want to continue to use that survey? Do you want people to email? To whom should they email? Like, how do you want that feedback and that suggestions? And I appreciated your saying that they were going to put those recordings up soon, because I know people are looking for those. I would ask that we just put the link to the recording on the actual event as well. So like if you go to the elementary parent one, you should be able to see the recording of the, not just in board docs, because people have a hard time navigating the board docs. But my primary question was like, how do people get additional feedback to you?
So we're continuing to take the feedback through the link, which takes them to the survey. That is the mechanism that we are using. Okay.
And so I would just ask that communications continue to promote that link to that survey very, very regularly, because I'm getting at least 1 or 2 a day emails saying, hey, how do I put this? This is what I think. What's the best
survey? Yes, we will get that out. We will absolutely put it out again.
Okay, that would be really terrific. And last thought is, I love the Microsoft Teams commentary approach so much that I wonder if there's a way to build a piece of that in for the middle schools, the middle school students, as well as for the parents, because I think the students could also, at that age, they could do it. And I'm going to encourage you to think hard about whether you can do another set of forums and when. So I know that this set of forums was more about adjusting the plan, taking input on the plan. But once we get beyond that, towards like, you as a parent now need to really understand this, I think those forums were a great way to really have that two-way communication. So as often as we can do that, I really think that was a great model to go with. So more of those, more.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us, I think, unless somebody has something that they can't live without, seeing no hands raised, to public comment, which has never happened this late in the meeting before. And I am surprised to be here to tell you that we actually did not get any formal public comment this week by either video or, voicemail or by email. I was surprised by that. I just want to reiterate for people who are listening at home that the board really welcomes input from the community. We really value that, and we think it's incredibly important and helpful both to us and to the staff. As many people know, when we meet in person, we set aside time and people can come and speak to us for up to 3 minutes on the topic of their choice. Now, because of the COVID closure, we adopted a brand new public comment policy that will go on even after the COVID closure, that will allow members of the community to submit their public comment by email, by voicemail, and by regular mail. If you want to make a comment that's not in person, you just need to get it to us about 6 hours in front of the meeting, so by about 12:30, because it takes a little time to collect them and format them and whatever. And board meeting days are surprisingly busy. The contact information for all of those is at albanyschools.org/BOE. And again, there were no voicemails and no emails received by 12:30 today. If we got any after that, I did not see them, and we can read them at the next meeting. Hang on, I'm flipping screens here, folks. I'm sorry. So that brings us to routine consent. This part of the meeting we use to approve routine matters for the district. That includes things like contracts, field trips, personnel matters, and the like. Each board member reviews each item very carefully, but we vote on them as a group with no discussion. That allows us to use our meeting time more efficiently. Nonetheless, each board member has the option to set aside any routine consent item in order to require a separate discussion and a separate vote on that item. With that introduction, I will now entertain a motion to adopt the routine consent agenda. Can I have a motion? Motion by Ms. Smith and a second. Hang on a minute. For some reason, I've got Vicky pinned and I can't see anybody else, and I see no other hand. And I second by Dr. Chatoor. Are there any set-asides? Can you raise your hand if you have a set-aside only? I do not see any hands. I believe that means there are no set-asides. So now, all in favor of adopt, wait, they're voting before I've even asked for the vote. That's what's happened. Can I please now have the vote for adopting the routine consent agenda in its entirety? You can raise your hand virtually if you plan to vote yes on the routine consent agenda. Ms. Krejci, did you care to vote? Let me pin you, see if I can see you better. No, I can't see you at all. Oh, there we go, sorry. And I also vote yes, so that is an anonymous passing of the routine consent agenda with 6 members present. Again, Board Member Mann could not be with us tonight. The next item is also an action item. It's the action on the DSIP, which is the District Comprehensive Improvement Program plan. As is our normal practice, the DSIP was made available for public comment last time we met, and we discussed it at some length at our last board meeting. Board colleagues, as you know, we can certainly continue the discussion tonight after we begin the motion. And I would like a motion to adopt the DSIP. Motion by Ms. Smith, second by Dr. Chatoor. Is there any discussion? Mr. Elmanyawi, your hand is up. Do you actually have discussion, or is that just a residual hand up? Okay. So seeing no interest in discussion, all in favor of adopting the DSIP? Who am I missing? There we go. That is a unanimous adopting of the DSIP as it is displayed on the agenda, item G. This is now, we're going to go on now to the discussion action topic of the capital project, which is at Albany High Phase 3.
So thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I will turn the time over to Ms. Roaring, our Deputy Superintendent of Business and Finance.
Good evening. This evening, I am also joined by Mr. Rich Peckham from CS Arch and Mr. John Dawes from Turner Construction, who will be supporting us in the presentation this evening on Phase 3. Mr. Peckham, if you'd like to start.
Okay, am I taking control and sharing, or are they putting up the presentation?
Ms. Bowie, did you want Mr. Peckham to share, or did you want to share the
Mr. Peckham, you are presenting tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me just open that up and I will share it quickly here, and we will get moving. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the presentation now. So I'm going to go through a presentation on what the final recommendation is for the Phase 3 value engineering and award of contracts, and then we can open it up from questions. So first off are a couple things that we presented in a previous board meeting and reviewed with the facilities committee on things that ultimately we're not recommending to do changes on. So there are no recommended changes to the exterior design. When the contractor came back with their formal pricing, they were saying there wasn't really going to be a savings, the changes we're proposing. So there are no changes to the exterior design. As far as the lobby flooring, we had talked about changing the size of the lobby floor tile. Again, that was in the end felt that made too big of a change from what we already have in Phase 1 for continuity, and therefore we're not recommending making changes to the size of the tile in the lobby. Really just kind of bringing you back to the auditorium design, which we're not making any substantial changes. The only change we're making in the auditorium is to change the material we're using for the underside of the balcony ceiling. All of the rest of the acoustical panels, the seats, the stage, the balcony all stay as was designed and bid. So this is just another view from the balcony looking at the stage, showing the acoustical panels on the walls of the auditorium. There was some request to better understand how the paths between the lower level of the auditorium and up to the stage area occurred. So we put together some diagrams just to show the multiple routes that are available. There's a route, an internal route using a stair that takes people up from the spaces that are under the auditorium. There's an internal route that's shown in the blue line here to take people from the areas under the auditorium to an elevator to get them up to the auditorium. And then there's a route, if there's large things that need to be moved in the green line, it would take them outside the building where they could load something on a truck and then take it around to the back of the stage, which I'll show on the next plan. So these plans, the stair carry up the up this stair and then in the side of the stage. That's no different than anything they do now because there's not an elevator that goes between the different levels of the auditorium building now. They could take stuff up the elevator I showed from below and then into the stage. There's also this other stair at the front of the auditorium where you enter the auditorium that can be used between the lower level and this level, because sometimes actors and actresses come from waiting areas below and can come up and come down the aisles of the auditorium if that is one of the parts of the presentation. And then to get to the balcony, people can either use the elevator or the stair right off the entrance vestibule area where they will go up to the balcony area where using this stair or the elevator and come in the balcony entrance for accessing that. The changes we had talked about in the last presentation that we're recommending for the Library Media Center is to change the wood wall to a painted wall system, still with the reveals to give it character there, taking out the angled custom panels on the walls and putting in some wood backing there so that in the future, pretty much anything can be mounted on those walls. If the district so desires to mount something on them, whether it's artwork or other, whether it's flags of the students, whatever it may be, you'll have the ability to mount on those. Changing the ceiling underneath the, or over top of the circulation desk area and the entrance area to a painted drywall ceiling instead of the wood ceiling. And in the previous rendering, this ceiling area, this raised up ceiling area, was shown as a dark color there. We've decided to change that to white. Really doesn't have a cost impact, the change in the color, but the other work here reduces the cost by removing the wood of that ceiling. We had some discussion about the acoustical panels on the ceiling in the auto tech and building trades area and reducing those. And the diagrams here kind of show that it was a more monolithic ceiling surface in the gray shaded areas. And the proposed recommended change is to reduce that amount, still sufficient for the acoustical needs of the space. This was more an aesthetic desire to have a more monolithic ceiling. But when we look at the two classrooms, that this really impacts the building trades and the auto shop and reducing the amount of coverage of this tectum ceiling material. When we looked at the renderings of what the difference was going to be, this is what the ceiling would look like as we bid the project. And then this is what the ceiling will look like as we change. Those acoustical panels are really the same color as the ceiling, so they don't make a pronounced impact on the visual of the space. So this is kind of a rendering of the lower ceiling area of these spaces, and then at the higher ceiling area, this is what it was as the bid design, and then this is what it is with the recommended reduction in the ceiling mounted sound absorptive panels. There was discussion about changing the fence material around the dust collector and the outdoor storage area. It's been determined for securing materials that an outdoor storage area is no longer desired or prudent. It has also been pointed out that the district is changing how they're procuring some of the materials, so they don't procure everything at the beginning of the school year and have to store it for the whole school year, but they'll have it delivered on a more as needed basis. So the need for this outdoor storage has been taken away. And once we remove the outdoor storage, the savings to go to something different for fencing around the dust collector had a very minimal savings on the project. So this is just the type of fencing or more of a solid material that will be going around the dust collector to shield that from view. Another one of the major areas that we've talked about is some savings proposed from phase 4 that we can bring forward to phase 3 to reconcile the budget in phase 3. And this is really surrounding the scope of work that was designed at schematic design for the exterior storage, restrooms, and concessions to service the multipurpose field. Part of the decision here is to take the concession building and the restroom building, kind of right now there were going to be two separate structures, to consolidate them into one structure and reduce the size of that slightly. The size will still be consistent with what we've designed for other suburban council schools and other school districts that we've worked with, and then look at the size of the exterior storage to really only be what needs to be out by the field. There's a large storage area underneath the phase 2 addition, and having better control inside the building where it will be temperature controlled and or more secure than out in an outdoor structure. We can reduce this and save some money there. The other part of the outdoor area was all of this shaded area was a paved surface. It was estimated as being a concrete pavement at schematic design that we're going to propose to reduce the area of that somewhat and also change 2/3 of it to asphalt pavement, which was consistent with what is there now and what is often typical around high school athletic facilities. And then there's a line of fencing that was on this line along the edge of the field complex to kind of secure that edge. It had been estimated originally as a decorative metal fence, and to be more consistent and to be able to provide better security of enclosing the field, we're going to change that to a 10-foot high chain link fence as a secure perimeter along this side of the field. So just kind of summarizing those changes, combining the concessions and the restrooms into one structure and reduce the total building area to 1,400 square feet. That has a savings. Reduce the storage, which is to a smaller amount, and reduce the budget on that. And the budget on that is still more than what we had planned pre-referendum as we looked at the cost of that. Reduce the area of the plaza and the sidewalks, and our current thinking is to make about 1/3 of it concrete pavement, more right around the concession area, and then 2/3 of it asphalt pavement, which is more of the paths between the areas. I didn't mention, I'm going to just back up, didn't mention in the schematic design, we had a retaining wall right along the edge of the track to make it so that we could put this concession building out towards that edge. If we move that away from that location, we can eliminate that retaining wall, which wasn't estimated pre-ref, so we have savings there. And then, as I mentioned, change the decorative fencing to 10-foot high chain link fencing. So we've been talking about a target of saving $500,000 on the cost of these amenities at the multi-purpose field. And this just shows you the savings we're proposing to get to that total. So just to summarize the things that we're recommending not changing that we've looked at or discussed previously. The exterior glazing, which I showed the rendering of, we're not going to change. The exterior wall furring system, we're not going to change that underneath the metal panels. The system we're providing provides superior weather protection for the building. I already mentioned the size of the porcelain floor tile. We've talked previously about the possibility of changing the exterior ductwork insulation system from a factory fabricated system to either a local shop or field fabricated to be consistent with phases 1 and 2 and to optimize the performance of that and reduce future maintenance costs. We're recommending to keep with the specified consistent insulation system. And then we had talked about potentially deleting the side lights at the classroom doors. And that was felt for consistency and throughout the building that we would not delete those. So the things that we are changing, and most of these we've talked about at the last meeting and subsequently reviewed with the Facilities Committee. You can kind of see the list. Redesigning the landscaping on the site work is the biggest individual savings. And then the temporary flagpole, the guardrail change from stainless to powder coat, change bollards from stainless steel to steel, remove masonry on a small planter wall, revise the concrete walks, and as I mentioned before, eliminate the exterior storage, and that adds up to a savings on the site contract of $196,000. General construction, we'd eliminate the side lights on the 2R rated walls in CTE because the cost of those is substantial. We'll eliminate the furring system behind the masonry veneer because it's not required behind the veneer to get the same performance. Change the manufacture of the vehicle lifts to rotary. Delete cleaning at substantial completion. We still have the contractor doing full cleaning at final completion. We're going to change the density on spray fireproofing. I mentioned when we're looking at the auditorium, we'll change the ceiling under the auditorium balcony. The next line item is those elements of the media center we talked about changing to eliminate the wood and the angled panels. The CTE ceiling acoustical panel reduction. The PE flooring changes, and this is something we've reviewed in detail about changing from a rolled product to a poured product and changing the manufacturers of the basis of design, and we can save some substantial money there without any reduction in performance of the athletic flooring or the maintenance requirements of it, and depending on certain aspects, the maintenance may actually be reduced from what we had. Some structural reinforcing adjustments. This was just that we can reduce the spacing of some of the reinforcing and not affect the structural performance. It was done to match up what was done in phase 1 and 2, but we changed structural engineers, and our current structural engineer feels we can reduce that. There were some voluntary deductions. The contractor had inaccurately carried a City of Albany building permit in their bid, which is not required, and a couple months of overlapping trailer cleaning that the phase 2 contractor is doing. That's the trailer cleaning for the construction managers in the field office trailer. We had some digital wall coverings that we were going to put up in the gymnasium area, not necessary for the project. And then we're going to delete the ceiling in the textbook storage area as the storage area. So the part of that area where a person works full time but still have a ceiling in it, but where the books are just stored, it would be a savings to take that ceiling out. So those savings are $514,682 on the general contractor deduct. Electrical contractor, we're going to change the technology cabling to match the updated district standard. We're just going to change the manufacturer on the exit signs. In the auditorium, we're going to run the low voltage cable neatly up in the auditorium ceiling area along beams and structure and paint it out with the ceiling. Critical areas of the cabling for the sound system will still be in conduit. We'll neatly run the low voltage cable hidden to the extent possible in other open areas of the building, like the weight room, the wrestling room, the CTE spaces that don't have ceilings. And then in those same exposed spaces, except for the gymnasiums in this case, we'll run the electric circuits with what's called MC cable, which is a flexible electric cable instead of separate EMT conduit. And that saves $106,000. Security cameras, there was some double scoping between phase 1 and phase 3, so we have a small savings there. Then we have a cost neutral change, and that's the general contractor. If we can take down one of the stair towers earlier than what the bid schedule had, there's some savings to that cost of about $50,000, but it means we have to run a temporary gas line because the gas service to the existing building comes in through that tower we're taking down. So that's a cost neutral change. So all of the changes for the contractors would end up being $824,778. And then there's another savings for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Pre-referendum, we had budgeted $4.5 million for furniture and equipment on the project. And since the vote, we've done a room-by-room detailed budget, and that's generated the fact that we can provide the new equipment for $425,000 less than what the original budget was. So we can carry that savings over to the construction budget. So this is just a project budget summary to start with the contractor scope reductions, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment reduction. We have $65,000 of contingency money that we're going to transfer over from phase 1. There's a phase 4 budget reduction I hadn't talked about before, but we're going to resurface instead of completely reconstructing the running track around the multipurpose field. Resurfacing it is the scope that had been presented pre-referendum and budgeted pre-referendum. We talked about the details of the changes to the multipurpose fields. So you can see that gives us the total reductions of $1,996,150, which is $10,150 more than what we projected the current budget overage was. What I didn't show on this slide, just to remind the board, is there's still a 3.2, I think it's $3.2 million, 7.2% of the budget available in construction contingency for the project. So I tried to go through that as briefly as I could, but hopefully it explains where we're at in the recommendation to go forward with award of contracts tonight. John Dawes, do you have anything you want to add?
I do not, Rich.
So thank you all very much for this very detailed presentation, and I appreciate you, Mr. Dawes, in particular, for your brevity. That was excellent. Ms. Smith, did you want to give us a little bit of a summary or any other commentary out of the Facilities Committee? I know that one of the things this board has been working on since before I joined it is moving more of the level of detail that was done in this presentation for the discussion of that level of detail to be happening in the committees where it can really be fleshed out in a tremendous amount of detail. And I'm really proud of the work done by the Facilities Committee, and I'm thrilled that it happened in this context where those of us who wanted to observe the working of the Facilities Committee could do that easily virtually. And I know several board members who are not on facilities did observe the committee, and so got a lot of our questions answered there. But Ms. Smith, as chair of the Facilities Committee, is there anything you wanted to add or comment on?
Here we go. So, well, thank you for that. And I want to just express thanks to Mr. Peckham and Mr. Dawes, Mr. Mara, certainly Ms. Roaring, and my colleagues that serve on the Facilities Committee. We met several times since our last board meeting, and we were presented with, we attempted to raise a number of questions that we knew the board had, but also to get answers to those. And so I'm pleased tonight to say that following that meeting, my colleagues, Ms. Wilson, Mr. Elmanyawi, and myself, we would like to recommend that the board go forth with the changes that have been presented here tonight that amount to significant cost savings, which is what we were trying to get to, and to go forth with those contracts that are before you tonight.
Anyone have any questions or discussion on this point? I really appreciate the way the reductions that were found were very clearly identified as things that would not impact student program. I mean, I think it was really wonderful to see that focus on finding ways to save money that would not impact the utility of the building long term. So if there's no further discussion, I'm going to entertain a motion to adopt all of the contracts and change orders that are listed as items H4 through 10 on the agenda. Just as we do with routine consent, every board member, if you have a reason to have a concern about any one of these, I think before I take the motion, I'm just going to double check that if anybody has a concern about any one of these, I'd like to peel it out, not have to deal with amended motions. So if you have your hand up right now, put it down for a sec, and then only raise your hand if you intend to vote no on one of these contracts. Okay. With that, I would like to entertain a motion to adopt all of the stuff on items 4 through 10, and I'm going to give Ms. Smith the honor of the motion as the chair of the Facilities Committee, and Ms. Wilson as the senior member of the Facilities Committee, who's not the chair, the second. All in favor of adopting all of these contracts and change orders, please raise your hand. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Somebody's hand is not up. Ms. Krejci, I do not see your hand. Are you intending to not vote yes? Let me pin you. Maybe you're raising your real hand. Nope.
I'm raising my real hand. Now I'm raising.
There's your real hand. Okay, I couldn't see it at first.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That is unanimous to 6. Since Ms. Mann is not here, I ask you that you all put your hands down now so we don't get confused next time. Thank you very much. And that brings us now to the policy agenda, and I will turn the virtual microphone over to Dr. Chittor.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So today we have 5 policies for discussion. Most of the changes are minimal, but I'll walk you through those. First one is 1900, which is parental involvement. The purpose of the policy is to encourage positive parent and family engagement in school educational planning and operations such as involvement as such involvement is essential to student achievement. The policy has been slightly modified to match current practices and Title I regulations. Notable changes in this sections related to parent engagement approaches and capacity building, where the policy now reflects positive changes that have been implemented in the last couple of years. The second policy for discussion is 9645, disclosure of wrongful conduct. This policy provides guidance on procedures to handle unethical behavior among district employees. The policy has been slightly modified to match current practices again. The term wrongful conduct now includes actions that compromise the security and integrity of the district or state's testing program. This term does not reflect abuse in an educational setting since it's already covered under 0110.1. The school attorney and independent auditor are also now included as board designated officers to whom reports of mismanagement, fraud, or abuse could be made in addition to the superintendent. The section on protection of whistleblowers, which is also called complaints of reprisal, was also edited to match current practice. One thing to note that while this may be confused with 9140.1 staff complaints and grievances, 9140 talks more about the lower level grievances or complaints, while 9645 deals with serious offenses where the board needs to be immediately notified. So that's the distinction between this policy and the older one. Policy 6240, which is investment, has minimal formatting changes. 67, purchasing, it was edited to include the deputy purchasing agent instead of the term school business official, which was the change we made a few years ago. The number of purchasing order copies also reduced from 5 to 3 in keeping with current adopted protocols, making it more time efficient in processing the orders. Policy 6410, which is authorized signatures, was edited to remove pronouns and to include the deputy purchasing agents. Any questions? Once again, these policies will be acted on at the next board meeting.
So there's no action on policy tonight because these will be acted on next time. So this does bring us to the end. Actually, I should have made up my little action statement prior to this. The end of the action items for tonight. The board does not anticipate taking an action after this, although sometimes it does happen. Normally we front load all of the actions to the beginning of the agenda. So that brings us to a discussion of the board goals. Those of you who have been around for a while know that there is, we have developed a process under the guidance of the New York State School Boards Association and their training and best practices on developing board goals. And I have not really looked at this presentation since we adopted our board goals in February, but I do think it's important. So you can move to the next slide, Tanya, to just remind people about why we do board goals. Just like everyone else, our full focus is on our vision and mission, how we will live up to those statements, and specifically around student achievement, quality instruction, leadership capacity, empowering families, and partnering with our diverse community. So just like staff has goals that they have each year, the board has goals that they have each year. And you can move to the next slide. We develop those goals through a process of board self-evaluation. We meet together to talk about board practices and how our operations are or are not being effective and how that can and should support excellence in the district. We use the NYSSBA board self-evaluation rubric, which we did last in December 2019. We will do again this coming fall sometime. We accept input from each board member and of course from the superintendent, who works with her cabinet to ensure that she has a full picture of their input as well. And from that process, we develop goals for how we're going to improve our practice for the next year. And if you move forward, I just want to talk briefly about board goals, which I know all board members understand, but for those in the community, board goals are about our practice. They are not about the district's practice, even though the ultimate goal, of course, is student success. For us, it's about, for board goals, it's about what can we do differently to make our practice better that will ultimately result in in a better product for our students and for our community. So district goals are about the district, board goals are about the board. When we adopt district goals, they're very general and intangible, things like student achievement, because they're implemented by the staff under the direction of the superintendent, and they lead directly to her goals and to the goals that we adopted tonight in the DSIP, the District Comprehensive Improvement Plan. Board goals, on the other hand, are about our practice. They're about the board. They're very specific, measurable. They're narrow and concrete because they're implemented by us very directly or with some limited staff support. So we went through this whole process last December and we adopted board goals in February of this past year, it's February of 2020. And those of you who've lived through February and March of 2020 know that it was quite an interesting year. So we did not necessarily get to the board goals the way we expected to, but we did nonetheless get to some. So Tanya, if you could open the actual board goals document, we're each just going to take a minute to walk through the board goals for our other board colleagues and talk about where we are on each goal. And we'll let Ms. Bowie catch up here. So unfortunately, Damaris is not with us. Board Member Mann is not with us tonight. So I don't know if she had planned to have a comment on how she's done this. I know we have done a fair amount of connectivity building, but why don't we pass over this one tonight since she's not here? And I will give the floor back to you, Dr. Chittor, to talk about this second bullet on goal 1.
So the goal here was to leverage our connections with the universities and other partners in the area to get more opportunities for our students. So, as this was going on, COVID hit, so things sort of got to a scrunching halt with the partners. In spite of that, what we were able to successfully achieve, at least for the summer, is in partnership with Albany Medical College, and Dr. Subbaram is running a summer school program where there are high school students participating in the program, albeit virtually. Normally, these people would be in a lab doing experiments and learning about research, but these students are actually doing this virtually online. And we have 4 Albany High students participating in that program. So even though it is not quite what we expected, we can still do part of what we intended to do. And hopefully, there'll be more coming in the upcoming year.
Board goal 2 was predominantly a responsibility for me and for Secretary Wilson. And I'm going to speak to the first and third bullets, and then she can speak to the second one. The first bullet around message map, this was one of the board goals that was the most highly dependent on staff availability, which of course, staff availability was quite constrained in March, April, and May and June of this year. So we have some intentionality around developing a message map for board members to use, and we have worked with the superintendent to schedule some time with the communications department, but we have not actually implemented that. On the other hand, the third bullet, developing a presentation about the role of the board. There is a draft. It has been presented to the board, and we are looking for feedback on that and hoping to have that whipped into shape of an actual presentation that we would bring to PTA meetings so that PTA members and other similar meetings, anytime, any group that we can get together, can understand the role of the board and how that's different from the role of the superintendent and how they can get further involved in board work. Tabitha, can I turn over bullet number 2 to you?
We researched videotaping board meetings through this experiment that we've had with basically going because of the pandemic, having to transition to Zoom meetings, well, actually Google Meet and now Team. So we're still investigating that, whether it can be leveraged as we go forth, whether the executive order expires. And I did also make some contact with outside groups about how to talk also with the superintendent, like in our one-on-ones, about how to basically promote engagement with the board meetings via video. So things such as the Channel Albany and things of that nature, we're still investigating that, whether we can have snippets that would be valuable for the community to partake in. And we're also looking at the way the other government entities in our city does business, whether it be Albany Public Libraries and or the Common Council. Thank you.
This bullet is sort of a be careful what you wish for bullet, because we wish to have our board meetings be videoed online, and they were, but perhaps not the way we thought they were going to be.
Manifested, yes.
Yeah. Goal 3, promoting student engagement and student voice in board communication. Mr. El-Menyawi and Board Member Krejci, did you want to speak to this?
I can speak to some of it. Due to the school closure, we were not able to go to student government meetings. As far as the student newspapers, for a while, the high school newspaper was not updated. It has been updated at the end of June. We don't have the masthead for next year yet, but I'm hoping that once the schools are back in session, we will at least be able to have student governments and class officers information, so we can find out if they are also holding virtual meetings that we can attend. But so far, neither of those goals has moved forward due to the closure.
Totally understandable. So I think that we did an excellent job defining our board goals this year, and we have implemented more of them as I look than I thought, right? When I realized we was coming up in July, and I thought, oh Lord, we have to talk about board goals, and we've just been all in on the COVID closure and now reopening. But in fact, we have implemented some of the work, and we're doing relatively well, especially on goal 4, which is professional development for the board. We did, in fact, have our first CRE for the board specific, quite similar to, I understand, what the staff experiences, and we did do one session of that before the COVID closure, and we are working with the superintendent to schedule additional sessions right now. In person, we hope, with only 7 of us plus facilitators, we believe we can do that in person. Ms. Smith, did you want to add anything about this next bullet on board specific CRE training?
Yes, so thank you. I just want to say I really, that CRE training, first training, was just so invaluable, I think, to the entire board. And I am really thankful we were able to go through that and appreciate the staff facilitation of that. I couldn't imagine doing that in their position, but they did a fantastic job. I wanted to just add that, and I think we have been sort of on our own, and I've been helping to do this, gather a lot of different materials, articles, various perspectives on, on race, on other kinds of things that we need to face. I have been keeping them in my own file on my desk, but I really want to move some of those things over into our, we've set up, thanks to President Savage, a Google's Doc where we can store a number of things. And I'm surely hoping that some of those articles we can use to sort of continue the work that we are doing together. And again, I just want to thank the superintendent and staff for really allowing us to and creating that opportunity for us to experience what our teachers and other staff have experienced through CRE. We also know there's a great deal more work that we as a board want to do to make sure that we are, cognizant, aware, making decisions, and we believe we are, but even better decisions, understanding our needs and looking at everything from an equity and access lens. So I thank you so much for everyone. Did you want me to continue on the next one, or you want to say more? Okay. So the other thing is we have a team operations manual, and well, let's just say we have a draft of it, and we started some time ago making some changes. I have really not taken on the leadership that I had promised with my 2 colleagues, Dr. Chatur and Ms. Mann, but so we haven't met to finish that work or identify 3 high priority projects. However, what I have done is just taken a little leadership more recently to take a look at this document, and I'm going to propose that we don't need to look at 3 high priority changes that we want to work towards, but rather I've taken a look at some things, also gotten some input from superintendent on this, because they also have their own cabinet and staff manual, and I wanted to see how that was put together. So I think we are really going to be ready in the next month to really sit down together to look at this document, and then to put out a pretty advanced team operations manual for your review and comment. So I know that's ambitious, but I'm committed to that. And so Dr. Chatur and Ms. Mann, I will be in touch with you about a meeting in early August here. So thank you.
That is exciting. That would be great. Goal 5, continuing to expand our influence in organizations that effectively advocate for urban public education. This is something that we're really trying as a board to do. For many years, this board was really focused only on what was happening specifically in Albany's public schools, but in reality, we are operating in an ecosystem here, and being part of that larger public education and urban education ecosystem, we believe will bring great success to the district, and we believe has had great success to the district, as we have had in the previous years leading up to this one, substantial improvements in our state aid that allowed us to provide more program and services to our students with no significant increase in property taxes. So to that end, we had two primary goals: consider affiliating with the Conference of Big Five City School Districts, which we did. They are now officially the Conference of Big Five plus 3, and we are the third of the non-formal Big Five schools. This is essentially a lobbying and education organization that focuses on the needs of urban public schools, and it is the formal Big Five schools plus Mount Vernon, us, and I have just forgotten number 3, Utica. It dropped out of my head. I can look it up. But in any case, they've been very helpful to us already in increasing the effectiveness of our lobbying and helping us determine how we can get better access to decision makers besides our own local delegation, who have been incredibly helpful for us and who we talk to every year. We've expanded our reach by affiliating with the Conference of Big Five schools. Also, we're continuing to work with the New York State School Boards Association. We have maintained our Black Caucus membership for all board members. That's an important thing that we have committed to do. And we have, as possible, participated in their events. We have submitted already one resolution to the NYSBA as annual meeting by July 2020, which we did accomplish that goal. This year, we submitted a resolution trying to change NYSBA's stance on what they call substantial equivalency, which this board does not believe is an appropriate job of the City School District of Albany to provide decisions on substantial equivalency for the many private schools within our borders. We believe that is an unfunded mandate, and that those decisions should be made by the New York State Education Department or possibly the local BOCES, but certainly not by us. So that resolution has been submitted to NYSBA, and we hope it will be adopted at the annual meeting. And then I have been appointed to the New York State School Board's Resolutions Committee. So hopefully we'll get some more early warning signals when there is a resolution that we either would like to support or we would like to advocate in opposition to next year. So I know we did that relatively quickly. This was certainly an accountability measure for us to ensure that we look at these goals every few months and see how we're doing and where we need to be making further progress. And so, Ms. Smith, I see your hand.
Yes, and I just wanted to add one thing, and perhaps Ms. Wilson might want to say something as well, but I wanted to just make mention of the NYSBA Black Caucus group, because we got together pre-COVID. Now I can't remember when it was exactly, but pre-COVID, and I was very excited this go round. We had a very I think active and very proactive meeting with the members of the caucus, and it was just been really disappointing that we've not been able to kind of keep in touch in that way, you know, given that COVID happened. But they had some really exciting things on the agenda, and much of which I think complemented what we are already doing and the direction we're going in. And so I just thought it was just a tremendous meeting that we had, and really happy to support the voice of the Black Caucus of NYSBA. So thank you.
Anyone else with a last comment? Otherwise, I will just say thank you to my board colleagues. Oh, Tabitha, Ms. Wilson, I see your hand is up.
In retrospect, it would almost look like we may have selected these goals as if we could fulfill them, but I remember we agonized over them, so I was just doubling down on your statement that you thought that we were not so far along, but they just sort of self-actualized as we did the work, which is, I hope next year is the same thing, but you know, more or less, I'm just proud of that work that we did.
I think this board's commitment to understanding the best practices for boards of education and living up to what we believe that best practice to be is one of the things that's going to stand this board and this district in good stead over many years. And I certainly think having board goals, even if we don't always achieve them completely, having that intentionality around our own practice is really important. Ms. Smith and Ms. Wilson, you still both have your hands up according to my screen, but I don't know if those are residual or if you have something to add. And the hands are down. Ms. Smith, your hand? Yes. I think. Let me see. If I look at your face, maybe I can help figure out if you want to speak. Down. She says her hand is down. All right. So that will bring us on to the next item. Oh, sorry. Who did I miss?
The hand's not working. My hand's up, but it's not showing up.
My hand's not working. Go ahead.
With regards to golf, I also just wanted to provide an update that this is similar to what we had in the past, and working through government relations, trying to lobby with our Senate and Assembly, trying to make situations better for our students. So if you remember, there was a transportation policy that we had advocated earlier last year, and then we did it again in December. It has actually passed the Senate, and so now the next step is it's going to be an Assembly, and if that once Assembly votes yes on it, it'll become state law, and that'll change the safety guidelines for transportation zoning, and that will allow for more of our kids in urban district areas to be applicable for busing. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you for adding that in. For folks who were not following this from the beginning, the real issue is that the way that law is written right now is purely suburban in style. The only thing that gives you the ability to have transportation safety zones are traffic type safety things like the speed limit is too high or there are no sidewalks. They do not yet include things that we think are important. For example, a significant vacancy rate or crime rate, and we want to ensure that we are able to bus our kids at the expense of the New York State taxpayer as opposed to at the expense of the local taxpayer for when they are in those areas. So we're keeping our eye on it and hopeful that the Assembly will pass it and the governor will sign it. Okay, moving on. We are going to move next to the discussion of the elementary and secondary steps.
Good evening again, Madam President, members of the board. I'd like to take an opportunity to kind of set the stage this year for our SEPs, because as we know, we have been facing a lot of challenges that are outside of the school building, and it impacts the learning environment for our students. And so one of the biggest things that we started talking about last year with our equity policy was how do we actualize this equity among our students? And that was able to manifest itself as we focused on student voice. And so as we move through this year, we know that we dealt with COVID-19, but we also dealt with a lot of social injustices. And what are those things that we're going to do to embed in our curriculum to address those social injustices so that it becomes the social justice teaching? And so this year, one of the things that you did not see in the initial copies, but you will see in the revised copies, is that statement, that philosophical statement about in our SEPs, in our school improvement plans, what are those things that we can do in our curriculum to make those connections to that bigger picture of where our students fit in the world and how they can further actualize their voice. And so as a school community, we are committed to teaching our students to use their voice in academic and extracurricular spaces to bring attention to social justice. This year, we will continue to focus on providing students the skills and the strategies they need to fully access, understand, and the full complexity of grade level standards in math, ELA, and science, regardless of their foundational skill level in each subject area. So one of the pieces that we know is that many times people feel that people, being educators alike, as well as parents and community members, that all education is sequential. Many times it's not. Many times it is layered. And sometimes we teach a concept today and the light bulb goes off 3 months later when it's in connection or when it's in context with something else. And so the other piece that we're looking to do is we will look to continue to defy the myth that students cannot access grade level material until they have the complete mastery over certain skills, because we know that certain skills are developmental and certain skills improve over time and not all at one time. And so looking at the access of grade level material, we want to make sure that understanding that one of the myths is that disproportionality impacts academic progress of Black, Latino, economically disadvantaged, and special education groups. So we want to use our system to break down those barriers that perpetuate that myth so that all of our students are able to achieve. We also want to engage our students in a book read that will develop their lens for social justice across subject areas. And finally, we will continue to develop our building equity teams and our student leadership teams to ensure that the continued professional development integration of CRE focuses on the teaching in the culturally responsive manner so that these practices can be enhanced in our classrooms and increase our student voice in the decisions that are made in our school community. And that statement, as you look at it philosophically, I want to thank Dr. Wilson Turner for her work in developing that and understanding that full complexity of how everything is connected so that we can set the stage, not just at the elementary level, but at the middle level and the high school level, so that as we move forward, we are using our data to inform our decisions, but also how does it connect to equity through a social justice lens. So I want to publicly thank Dr. Wilson Turner, and I also want to thank Lori McKenna and Karen Bechtel for their input, because this statement really does embody where we stand as we move forward within our curriculum. So thank you, Dr. Wilson Turner, and I will turn the time over to Dr. Wilson Turner and Lori McKenna for the SEP overview.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. I, in partnership with Lori and Karen and our CRE facilitators, continue to reshape the lens that influences the work that sets the context for everything that we do in our system, and we hope that our SEPs are reflective of that. As always, our vision, mission, statement, and goals are aligned to the excellence that we want to see achieved for our students, and our SEPs support that very explicitly and intentionally as it works to close gaps for specific subgroups. So tonight's presentation will open with the elementary focus, and Ms. McKenna will take over with the middle school and high school focus. However, there are some similarities that you will notice throughout those plans. We wanted to note that there were some significant changes to the format of the SEP process this year. One of our favorite is the switch from the Excel document to the Word document. I'm sure the board agrees, but I'm sure that Tanya and my ladies in the office agree with all the formatting work they used to have to do, and made it much easier to navigate. The stakeholder engagement section was formatted very differently, and I think very intentionally by the State Education Department to really speak to the level of participation that is required in developing the SEP. And so in that checkbox, you'll see how frequently the teams have to meet and how different members of that team contribute to different concepts of the plan as it's developed over time. The approach to mid-year benchmarks this time around is much more concrete. And so whereas last year we gave generalities as to what we would measure, this year we talked about not only what we would measure, but what the actual benchmark was from a year ago in the winter, which is really relevant, seeing as that's probably our last standardized data point was our winter assessments. So that is going to be significant because it'll have a clear measurement for this winter of 2021. And then the COVID-19 reflection was significant for us as well. And you'll notice that there were a lot of similarities around the COVID-19 reflections, and that was really intentional. And I'll get into that as I talk about the development of the process. Our goals, because we choose the ESSA indicators, are tied directly to the metrics that our schools are measured by each year. And so you'll see the consistency of ELA, math, chronic absenteeism, and survey related, but you'll see some variability where you would traditionally see the English language proficiency or school selected, because most of our schools score 3 or 4 with the English language proficiency for our English language learners, which is incredible, which allows us to focus energy into some other areas that our data suggests that we need to provide support. So I alluded to this process that we used at the elementary level this year that mirrors a process that Lori really began last year to really begin to have the instructional supervisors and the building principals really work in lockstep as we develop the improvement process. And that really began last summer when we charged our instructional supervisors to develop schedules that would have them living in our elementary school buildings so they could begin to see what their work looks like in real time and then begin to support the principals in the professional development and ideas needed to continue to move their buildings forward. This transcended during the COVID-19 crisis, where we began to meet very frequently as an elementary team, inclusive of our instructional supervisors. And we charged them with helping us to develop what they called SEP boilerplate language, some concrete high leverage practices that all buildings need to assess their progress in and determine where they should pick up in their SEP. And so you'll see similarities in what was selected, but you'll see buildings at different starting points, particularly in ELA and math. But you'll notice that the science goals were very similar because all of our buildings are starting FOSS in grade second and third grade. It's a brand new initiative, so they're all approaching that work in a very similar way. This resulted in a much more comprehensive SEP process, and it also helped principals, which is really difficult for them and their teams, to focus their SEP on some really concrete things that they can see the outcomes on versus all the different ideas that they generate. And I want to publicly commend the principals and instructional supervisors for giving lift to this work with everything else that they were managing and navigating during the COVID-19 closure to develop some really thoughtful plans that they think will have definite impact on our students. ELA and math really encapsulate the equity agenda of our district and the empowering of our students to have voice that is respected because it's founded in a strong educational foundation. And so a lot of the members in our instructional team have participated in the Unbound Education Standards Conference, which places an emphasis on the importance of understanding the background at which our students come from, how we approach teaching and learning and what our view is on that and how that influences our expectations on our students. And as a result, what happens is we can, based on that lens, determine that we don't think students are ready for grade level text or it's going to be too hard for them and we have to figure out ways to make it easier. But by making it easier and not developing a scaffold to support them to be able to actually access grade level text, we are doing our students a disservice and we are setting them up not to have a voice. We are setting them up not to be able to be successful and to be heard in a way that would be respected because it's based in an educational foundation. So our ELA and math goals are all connected to standards-based instruction and the strategies that will help teachers scaffold that learning for students as opposed to simplifying that learning for students. And it's very difficult and intentional work that has to happen. And so it results in continued professional development but in both ELA and math. And what's nice is that our instructional supervisors broke it down to here are the concrete steps that need to happen. And based on where you are as a school is where you pick up in those steps. So in ELA, you'll notice some buildings are starting with just being able to identify what makes a text complex and then what strategies you need to utilize in order for students to be able to access that text based on the students in front of you. Whereas other buildings have done that work and they're really able to dig deeper into how do you get student voice to be actioned in your questioning techniques. And so depending on the progression of that building, depending on the action steps that you saw. In math, you saw that consistency around those student math practices. And that will be the focus for every building, but you'll notice that different buildings are using different strategies because they may have already learned number strings or they may have already learned 3 reads and are using a different strategy at this point in time. Our intent is that over time, we will begin to see consistent instructional practices that scaffold learning to grade level standards in every single building that we walk into to ensure that our students have that consistent access to grade level text, consistent access to be able to have their voice heard and to be able to make an argument and state what's important to them as a learner. I mentioned science is pretty consistent with our FOSS rollout for grades 2 and 3. And even though FOSS has a huge hands-on component as we go into the COVID-19 structure that we're bringing students back to school in, you'll notice in the COVID-19 adjustments that ideas were placed in there as to how we could begin to address maintaining some element of hands-on learning in our science curriculum that aligns with what the safety protocols are. Chronic absenteeism continues to be, and I imagine will continue to be, one of our most difficult hurdles as you review the data in each of those plans. This is an area where buildings have built extensive plans for monitoring data, for supporting students and their families, to developing intervention plans that include students themselves, and to better increase the chances that the student will consistently attend and participate in school. And so you'll see those COVID-19 adjustments include developing concept of what participation means and how we support participation in the event that our students are virtual for any period of time. And then you'll notice a survey goal in each one of the plans, and that's based on the DTSDE survey that we conduct each winter. And based on their neediest area, building select an area that they're going to build a plan around, and they tend to focus on discipline challenges and school climate. And so they build plans specifically that support our Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 action plans in each building. Tenet 3 and 4 are unique to the receivership buildings. Sheridan Preparatory Academy and Giffen Memorial. And both Sheridan Prep and Giffen are working in partnership with On Point Leadership. And as a result of that consultant partnership, they are using specific strategies from the National Urban Alliance to support the planning required in Tenet 3 and the instructional delivery model required in Tenet 4. And the premise of those strategies is really about brain-based learning and how you utilize thinking maps to, again, teach children explicitly how to access that grade level text so that they can begin to perform on grade level. And that concludes the statements for elementary school.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wilson-Turner. As far as the middle school SEP overview, over the last 2 years, we have really shifted the SEP development process to be more inclusive of all stakeholders and not just representative of the school's building leadership team. At the middle level, each school has their core building leadership team, which was really the overarching team for finalizing each of the indicator plans. But what you'll notice, and this is the second year in a row that we have done this, that we have developed subcommittees for each one of these indicators, which develop the plan in its entirety, and included a larger representation of the content for each indicator. But before I get into the different indicators, I just wanted to mention, as Dr. Wilson-Turner did, that COVID-19 presented some real challenges that you will see addressed throughout the plans. And just to name a few, but certainly not all inclusive, around updating curriculum maps with focus on pacing and priority standards, assessing students in a remote environment, and sharing best practices for engaging students in a remote instruction. And certainly those are 3 really important areas to focus on as we begin to embark on this blended model for September. For ELA and math, the subcommittees were representative of all 4 middle schools. Each subcommittee had between 5 to 7 members developing the plan and then presenting it back to the building leadership team. We also ensured that district leaders were supporting the work at each building and developing the SEP in collaboration with the building leadership team and co-facilitating the subcommittees with a member from each BLT. You'll also notice that the ELA and math indicators are pretty similar across all middle schools, and this was by no means an accident. The only difference between the plans is the goal and the mid-year benchmark for each one of the schools, because it's based on their individual data. And I too would like to publicly thank the district leaders for supporting this important work and co-facilitating the ELA and math indicators in each of our plans. For the ELA indicator, there were 2 primary root causes as to why the middle schools has its current outcomes for ELA. I won't go into detail, but the first one is really around the secondary data team and consistently executing the model with fidelity and reviewing student work for the purpose of calibrating in alignment with its success criteria, modifying curriculum to ensure culturally responsive, equitable access to grade level text and task, and then also identifying, implementing, and analyzing the impact of research-based strategies and interventions to support students at each level of proficiency relative to the priority standards. The second root cause that the subcommittee found was really around the walkthroughs and feedback cycles and not consistently yielding actionable, targeted, and relevant feedback aligned to the building and or the teacher's goals in the building. So to address the root causes, to summarize the plan, the overarching focus of the SEP plan for ELA really has 3 key tenets: collaborative action research by priority standards and common assessments, instructional walkthroughs in classrooms and team meetings that result in complete cycles of inquiry, and the delivery of high quality feedback and embedded professional development at the teacher, team, and department level, facilitated by the instructional leaders at the administrative and teacher level. We did implement this structure during the 1920 school year and was really implemented successfully prior to COVID-19 closure. But we never really got to finalize that action plan. So for the 2021 school year, we've made minor adjustments and refinements to build on the strong foundation that we established this year, where we embedded embedded professional development will continue to focus on educational equity and anti-racist teaching through the lens of the learning standards and students' rights to grade level text and task, also activating student voice and culturally responsive high leverage instructional practices. This year's audience is the middle level reading interventionists and the building principals. Throughout the school closure, teachers and instructional coaches work really collaboratively to analyze trend performance by priority standards to backwards map action research for the 2021 school year. Common assessments were refined to be more cumulative in nature and reduce instructional time dedicated to formal assessments. We also, this year, all of our common assessments will be monitored through eDoctrina, which is, I think Ms. Bechtel mentioned that as our online platform for assessments. To strengthen the instructional walkthrough process, the building and district administrators will implement a cycle of inquiry model to ensure that classroom and team meeting visits build on each other and target a specific goal over time. And this is really a shift from where we were this past year to where we are going. And we are being really deliberate in this cycle of inquiry model. Instead of having one instructional classroom visit, we're going to have 3 to 4 instructional classroom visits with a specific teacher focusing on a specific period and a specific instructional strategy, and provide feedback in that cycle of inquiry. And we feel that that model will really have an impact on teaching and learning in the classroom. Similar to the ELA, the math indicator is similar across all middle schools. For math, the subcommittee identified one primary root cause as to why middle schools has its current outcomes for math, and that is really students enter each year with unfinished learning from previous grades and are not prepared to engage with grade level standards and skills. There's also a sense that there's an inconsistency in the vertical alignment in both curriculum and instruction that results in inconsistent instructional strategies across the grade levels that impact students' ability to problem solve. So to address those root causes, the committee that developed this under the leadership of Frank Delsignore, the action plan will focus on 4 recurring activities: professional development, common benchmark assessments, data teaming, and feedback to teachers. And this structure was also utilized during the 1920 school year and was implemented successfully prior to COVID-19 closure. So for this year, adjustments and refinements are planned for each activity. Professional development will shift to focus on vertically aligning the curriculum and instruction, enhancing curriculum and instruction for math AIS courses, and continuing to develop mathematical discourse activities. In year 2 of the math benchmark implementation, each exam will be revised and continue to be monitored again in eDoctrina, our online platform and assessment system. In addition, our summative assessments will be monitored through this system as well, and we'll continue to strengthen the data cycle process, where all data cycles will be pre-planned to focus on priority standards, be assessed as part of the common summative assessment whenever possible, and then monitored eDoctrina. Similar to ELA, We'll enhance the feedback to teachers during instructional and common planning team walkthroughs with building administrators also participating in embedded professional development sessions to develop their understanding of the math curriculum and instructional practices, which will also provide our building leaders that lens. So when they go into the classroom, they'll have that professional development right alongside their teachers, and they can also provide that feedback during their walkthrough cycles. And this is where the plans tend to be unique to each school. So each building leadership team developed the next 3 indicators in each of their plans. Each school had a survey indicator based on the DTSDE survey results that were administered in the fall of 2019. And based on those results, each team identified the question that they felt was the most important to improve upon for the 2021 school year. And looking across the SEP plans, they really focused on family connectedness, family communication, and then student behavior interfering with instruction. The action steps were developed to improve the perception from the stakeholder groups, which will be measured in the fall of 2020 when Ms. Bechtold rolls out the DTSD survey to students, staff, and families. And then again in spring 2021, where the schools will survey the stakeholder groups for that one specific question that they've identified to determine the impact and the level of improvement. Each school also has a disproportionality, suspension, and discipline referral indicator, where all schools focused on reducing disproportionality, suspensions, and discipline referrals with action items around regularly reviewing data, consistency in trauma-informed care, restorative practices, PBIS implementation with consistency, Tier 1 classroom management, preventative strategies, as well as the equity teams across the buildings. And then finally, the chronic absenteeism, and Dr. Wilson-Turner mentioned this one as well. Again, all schools had similar action steps aligned with to the district's chronic absenteeism plan, including regularly reviewing and monitoring data, consistent implementation of tiered strategies and interventions. And I think most importantly, identifying students who are approaching the definition of chronically absenteeism and putting interventions in place prior to them being considered chronically absent. And so those 3 indicators are well defined and outlined in each of the STEP indicators, in each of the STEP plans, but that's just a real high level overview and summary for the STEPs at the middle level. The high school is it is similar, but a little bit different. The ESSA indicator template for the high school includes graduation rate, just like our K through 8 plans, ELA and math, chronic absenteeism, English language proficiency, college, career, and civic readiness, and then again a survey related goal as well. The graduation rate indicator plan really focuses on using the MTSS structure to support the increase of students graduating, where there's a standalone MTSS team for ENL and students with disabilities. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. And the reason why there's a standalone MTSS team for ENL for our English language learners and students with disabilities is because those are the 2 subgroups that in our ESSA indicator data had a level 1. And so those are the 2 areas that we really need to focus on in increasing our graduation rate for our 4, 5, and 6 year graduation rates. The ELA indicator plan includes instructional walkthroughs in the classroom, and team meetings that result in complete cycles of inquiry and the delivery of high quality feedback. The common planning teams and data team model and cycles, including success criteria, curriculum and high leverage instructional practices, horizontally and vertically aligned systematically, resulting in related priority standards. And again, this ELA indicator is really around student proficiency on the ELA Regents exam. The math indicator plan, again, includes professional development, common benchmark assessments, data teaming, and feedback to teachers, with a focus on improving the outcomes for our algebra exam. Chronic absenteeism is also continues to be a challenge at Albany High School, like our other schools. In this plan, there's really a focus on the attendance committee, and then clearly articulating and identifying tier 2 and 3 targeted supports and interventions for our students who are already identified as being chronically absent, and for also those students who are approaching chronically absent status. The next area of focus in the high school's SEP is English language proficiency. And again, this focus is on increasing the 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rate for English language learners. And the overarching plan here includes a standalone MTSS team that really focuses on our L's in order to identify and provide targeted supports and interventions leading to an increase in our L's graduating within 4, 5, or 6 years. And then also progress monitoring for impact on the L's attendance and impact through that MTSS process. College and career readiness, and this goal, the goal of this indicator is to increase the number of students taking AP, IB, world languages, and CTE courses, the number of students earning a seal of biliteracy, and also increasing the number of CTE endorsements. So this is what that plan outlines. And finally, if they did not have the English language proficiency indicator, they would have included a survey-related goal, but because they had some level 1s for English language proficiency, we did not include a survey-related goal in this year's high school SEP. So with that said, I think that's it. We'll open it up to questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson-Turner and Ms. McKenna. This is always a difficult topic for the board because there's so much detail in each and every SEP, and there's so many SEPs. So what we have done traditionally over the last couple of years under the superintendent's leadership is each board member has reviewed carefully a couple of SEPs. And then also we always have access to all of the SEPs which are before us. So board colleagues, I would suggest that your questions now are mostly about process and overarching themes. I know that we each had opportunities to make proposals or commentary on individual SEPs for individual schools. So if you have a specific question, I'm not saying you can't ask it, but I just think given the nature of the board meeting and the way this information will be used, the overarching questions may be the ones that are the most pertinent. So does anyone have a comment or a question about the SEP process or about an individual SEP that you want to ask? Dr. Chatoor.
More a comment than a question. I mean, I really like this format of the DSEPs and the SEPs. You know, compared to what we had in the past, this is much more user friendly, especially with the SEPs. It's building specific and like you know, my board member, my colleagues would agree. Having the Word document is a lot more easier to read all of these things than the old Excel spreadsheets, especially when it was in PDF form and you could barely make out the letters. So I just want to say this is a step in the right direction. It's amazing where we have come over the last 5 years that I've been looking at these things.
Anyone else with a question or a comment on their SEPs? I think I saw a hand, but now I don't see it. Oh, Ms. Smith.
There we go. Yeah, that hand thing is tricky sometimes. Yeah, I agree with Dr. Chatur, and I really like this format. It seems also to me that and again, I can't speak for the groups that have worked on these various sections and pieces, but the flow is just much easier, much, just accessible, and important to me throughout all of this has been the social justice themes. I think it's just been incredible. So I just wanted to say kudos to everyone. And I think it's been a broader participation than perhaps in the past. And also, I don't want to say this is attributable necessary to this format because I could see this coming over time, but it seems to me that there's been much more, it's gone from being something that we have to do, tasks we have to complete to satisfy the state, versus something that's really powerful and meaningful to us as a district. And really sending it to the state is kind of secondary, right? I mean, it's important and we got to do it, but it's really very meaningful, specifically to each of our buildings and to our youngsters in those buildings. So just again, kudos to all.
Anyone else with a comment or a question? Sorry, I'm letting an airplane go over. I live under the flight path of this Albany International Airport, so it can be a little bit noisy every once in a while. So I want to second everything Vicki said about the SEP and its utility, as we talked about with the DSIP last time when we talked about the DSIP. The idea of these documents of actually being perceived as meaningful as opposed to compliance makes such a difference, and you can feel it in the way they are written, that they are written with an intentionality that we believe we can do this and that we will do this. I liked particularly the reliance on a survey goal throughout. It was really great and felt very unique and specific to that building. I also liked a couple of buildings chose more than one survey goal, which I know adds ambition, but I liked it because the survey goals are specific to a group. So it's either a parent goal or a student goal or a staff goal. And I liked this when I saw a couple of buildings, they chose both a student goal or a student survey item and a staff one. I thought that would give a real well-rounded sense that everybody in this equation is important. I will say that I struggle each year with the feedback tool that we use as board members because it asks, can you succinctly describe what the target is of this school? And I personally really struggle when I read a SEP and it's like 15 pages, and then I'm asked in my review, can you succinctly describe? And I'm not always able to do that. So I would benefit from a short 1-paragraph executive summary of each SEP describing what each school's target, or not, it doesn't have to be as specific as target, but just sort of the themes of the SEP for that school. Somehow, I think that would be, it sort of falls in that message map category, like how can we as a board understand and communicate to people at a very high level of detail all of the incredible work that's happening that's underlying those SEPs. So that's just my commentary on the process, and I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that. If so, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. It's just something that would help me.
Yeah, and at the secondary level, President Savage, I do have a SEP at a glance for each one of the schools, and I can share that format with Dr. Wilson Turner if she's interested in using that format with her elementary schools. And the SEP at a glance is what they use with their PTSA or anyone in the community that may want to see a summary of their SEP. So I agree.
Many of the elementary schools do that as well, but I do like the idea of almost an elevator speech because that is what they use with their staff. Like here are the things that we're working on as a building. In ELA it's this, in math it's this, in science it's this, in the survey goal it's this. So it's just that I do like that concept, and I think it's one that they could put together pretty easily because it's a summary of what they want people to know about their work this year.
Ms. Smith, do you have your hand up? I don't know.
No, I don't. It doesn't appear here, but
Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to lower it. Lower hand. There. I have the power to lower your hand. Try that in real life. That would be interesting. Superintendent Adams or Ms. McKenna, can somebody help me and make sure I'm clear on the process? Tonight, sometimes when we've come up against the SEPs, there's been a very tight process and we had to adopt them the night that we reviewed them. Are we in that state right now where you need us to formally adopt these, or can we let them sit till our next board meeting for public comment?
Yeah, so no, the only school that we need to submit to the New York State Education Department is Myers Middle School because they are a CSI school. However, in speaking with our state liaison, they indicated that we could submit the SEP prior to the board adopting it. And then once the board adopts it at our next meeting, we can submit it with the signatures. So we have submitted Myers SEP already.
Okay, great. So then we just need to make sure that when we're in agenda setting that we have the adoption of all the SEPs as a formality next time. And again, for members of the community that are listening, that we do this very intentionally so that if people have community feedback on the SEPs, that could be integrated prior to them being adopted. Okay. Anybody else have commentary on the SEPs, the SEP process, anything they want to say on SEPs? If not, we will move on to professional development.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Wilson-Turner and Ms. McKenna. I so appreciate the work that you do, and I too have learned a lot over the past 3 years in the development of our SEPs, and it's just from my vantage point, it's so good to see the progress that we're making along the lines of our SEP. And so now we have an opportunity to listen to our professional development. And so one of the things that I know that President Savage and I have talked about quite a bit is how are we making the connections with all the things that we are doing so that people can see that connectedness of our work. And so before we go into Ms. Bechtel's presentation, I'm going to take you back a minute to the presentation that she did with the DSIP. And that is the district improvement plan. And so when you look at that DSIP and you see that equity was part of our overarching objective, and looking at student voice and looking at how we teach our students to advocate in the various categories of how we empower our families, and then looking at social justice as a district, now you're seeing from the district level. Now you're looking at the SEPs, which would be the individual school level. So you're seeing some of that same language. And then how are we really preparing people up to meet those goals? And so when we look at our professional development presentation tonight, I will call your attention to some of the same themes that you are going to see and hear with regard to equity, student voice, social justice embedded in our curriculum, improving our practices through professional development, looking at CRE and the culturally responsive teaching and learning. And as we focus on that teaching piece and the learning piece for our students and the teaching piece for our adults, you're going to start to see those connections start to manifest. And while we sit here in one space with the DSIP, the SEPs, and then our professional development plan, I'd like for you to start making those connections with the training that the board is undergoing with regard to culturally responsive education as a whole, to understand how that fits into everything that we're doing and aligns with our vision, mission, and goals. And so with that, I will turn the time over to Mrs. Bechtel, who's done an outstanding job, and I know Jennifer Justice has helped her as well, and they have been working so well together to put together a professional development plan that truly aligns with those things that we are expecting to do and that we recognize are just imperative to the work that we do. So thank you to Ms. Bechtel, and I will turn the time over.
Thank you, Superintendent Adams, and thank you, Board of Education. I'm happy to be here tonight to speak to our next 2-year professional development plan. We are on a 2-year cycle. The plan is developed by a committee, but I will say that Jennifer Justice, who is mentor coordinator and provides support for our professional development program, is right there doing the work. So I do want to say thank you to her as well. So we have a process for developing the professional development plan. There is a committee. We conduct a review of the prior plan. We progress monitor the goals. We look at those goals and try to determine if those goals need to come into the next plan or if they have been completed. And I always provide the board with a report on how well we achieved the goals of the prior PD plan. So starting in January through June of 2020, the committee worked on revising and creating a new plan for 2022. We collected survey data as well as look at the school SEPs and DSIP to revise the goals. And as Superintendent Adams just pointed out, the interconnectedness this year is better than it's ever been. And I'm really proud of that work here. So next, we go to the changes in the new PD plan. I'd like to point out that about 6 years ago, when we built the 2014 through 2016 plan, we did a complete overhaul of the professional development plan and revised every single bit of that many page document. Subsequent to that, the plan and the goals have more or less stayed the same, not necessarily the action steps around them, but those overarching goals. This year, though, we have some substantive changes to the PD plan. We realigned our goal 1 and 2, and really it's a way to streamline it and make it cleaner and clearer. So we put in goal 1, the learning standards, the content knowledge, instructional strategies, all those things that sort of has that instructional overarching theme. Combine those for goal 1 and pulled data-driven instruction out of goal 1 as its own goal in goal 2. And one of the reasons for doing that is that it separated the tier 1, which is professional development for everyone, and that tier 2 and tier 3 professional development, which needs to go to a targeted audience for a targeted reason. Very excited to introduce you to our new goal 4, which is a blended learning goal. And I'll talk more about that as we get into the presentation. And another excellent addition is explicit social justice themes in our professional development plan. So you'll see in goal 1 that we've added an essential question that asks that we explicitly address embedding themes of social justice into our curriculum and embedding those social justice themes in our work with teachers as we are engaging in professional development. And then we also have an essential question in goal 3 to explicitly address disproportionality and the causes for those. So that is, let me just put this down. Yes, thanks. So let's get into the goals. So goal 1, as I said, it's about standards implementation. We have had new standards. It seems like we're constantly in the process of adopting and implementing new standards. The science are really the most recent, although world language is right there with it. So we are always staying attuned to what state ed is putting out and implementing those standards. And our standards have had a great shift since the beginning of Common Core, and it really is moving to inquiry-based, student-centered work, and they're excellent, really. So we always talk about content knowledge, the implementation of our programs at elementary, the social studies framework, the science standards, and using common planning time for that ongoing curriculum development. Instructional strategies in order to make the content more engaging. We rely upon our instructional framework, which includes a culturally responsive component, and our AVID strategies with a mission to close the achievement gap. That brings us to goal 2. which is data-driven instruction. So this is tier 1 for academics. There's always data that we look at when we are working in the academic world, and everyone needs to have facility with looking at that data to operate at the tier 1 core level. Then we have data for the tier 2, tier 3 when we're drilling down and digging deeper to determine what exactly we need to do with students for academics. So the data-driven instruction goal 2 is separated into those 2 separate categories. Our goal 3, which is around having a safe, respectful, and responsible community, is also sort of restructured into this tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 kind of structure. And the tier 1 interventions are the interventions that everyone must have. They're really for all staff. They're around de-escalation, restorative practices, using the fidelity checklist to monitor implementation, and of course our code of conduct. And then our target 2-3 is really getting into those interventions that are based on student need, and include things like the TIC Ready Room and tier fluidity, this understanding that students are not supposed to be sitting in tier 2 forever, that we want them to move from tier 2 to tier 1, or if they're in tier 3 back to tier 2, and those kinds of things. So, and that brings us to our brand new goal around blended learning. And I want to start by saying, while this is a standalone goal in our professional development plan this year, the ultimate goal is that it's incorporated into those other areas. But as we really set out to engage in blended learning practices, we felt that it was important for it to be standalone in this 2-year period while we are working on raising the capacity of folks. So I want to share a little aha moment of my own in this process in the spring. I had always, when I was training to be a teacher, everybody talked about the bag of tricks, but everybody also spoke about a really strong pedagogy as the foundation for the work that you do in the classroom. And if you have a bag of tricks and not that strong pedagogical knowledge, you're only going to get so far. And that made perfect sense to me as training for a teacher. I never really thought about it in terms of instructional technology. I just, what are the tools? What are the tools? What are the tools? Well, the tools are really kind of the bag of tricks. And what I come to understand that there's a pedagogy to instructional technology too. And there are standards around instructional technology that undergird that. And it's not just about having that bag of tricks. And that was a really great moment for me, because it crystallized for me how we have to move forward in supporting staff in learning more and more about this area. So it is about capacity building. It's about shifting from lecturer to facilitator using those models and those tools. And really, it's training in the International Society for Technology and Education standards over a period of time. Now, normally, you would start with the standards and go very hard with those to give that pedagogical platform. But we, because of the place that we're in, we have to focus a little bit more on our some of that toolkit bit, and then work our way into the standards into that. So we talked a lot about how that would work. So very excited about the blended learning goal. And then that brings me to finally my next steps, which is to distribute the PD plan to the principals, our teacher leaders, other staff. We post it on the website, submit it. Our statement of assurances to NYSED. We're going to be regularly progress monitoring the PD goals. I generally do that at the mid-year and at the end of the year in each of the 2 years. And then we just monitor how it's going, and then get that report to the board in August of our prior year's plan. And that ends my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. It's always exciting to watch you be excited about the work that you do. And particularly the way this has been evolving over time is really exciting for us. For me in particular, I've seen a lot of change in the professional development plan. Over the last 6 years, it really has evolved quite a lot and in ways that I think are very excellent and all good. Board colleagues, does anyone have a question they'd like to make their first question? Ms. Krejci.
Just a general comment that I thought this was really well put together, and I really appreciate seeing the social justice coming through both in the individual steps and then the techniques for social justice teaching in the professional development. It's really coherent and coming together in a good way. So thank you very much for the presentation. I really felt this was right on target for what we need right now.
Thank you.
Anyone else with a comment or a question from Ms. Bechtel? I'm going to second what Board Member Krejci said. And really what the superintendent's orientation to this is really what we're feeling, right? We're feeling that interconnectedness and that oneness of purpose that sometimes is happening in the district, but it's not always clear to people outside the district. And being able to get that information out and understandable to people on the outside world is what I think is really important about drawing those connections, seeing how they all fit together. And I certainly want to echo the commitment to social justice and embedding social justice in the curriculum is so on point and something we've been encouraging and supporting for some time. And I'm really excited to see it there really explicitly because I think I believe all the board colleagues who I know very well know and believe that the best way to change the world is to tell the truth in school all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Tell the whole truth. Kids can handle the truth, developmentally appropriate truth, but truth, and that we can change the world by not letting people only see a part of the story. So excited. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have anything they want to add? Ms. Smith.
Sure. I do absolutely agree with what the superintendent said about that sort of alignment, and you can feel that, you can see it, and Madam President, I worry a little bit less about what external, what people know or need to know on some level, because see, this work that we're doing right now, it has to happen. And sometimes it's not something you can necessarily explain while you're doing it. You have to just frickin' do that work. And it has to, anyway, you have, it's the work that's really matters and that's important. And some of it you are learning, you're figuring out as you go. We're not going to get it perfect. We're going to make mistakes, but we're just going to keep on going through it. And I think my thinking is I am going to learn better seeing folks' commitment to that work of social justice, of making sure every kid gets what he or she deserves and needs in life. I mean, you're going to have me on board, so that's why I worry a little bit less externally, although that's important. Those relationships and those partnerships and communicating what we do is critical. But what we're doing right now in our own house is what matters.
Yes, and there's so much energy, as you say, Ms. Smith, around this work right now, and I'm so happy that our 2-year plan was here in this moment. Not that we wouldn't have revised it, but it was timely. And the connections between this and the DSIP and really the work that folks are already doing on the ground, but making it explicit and an expectation, and we're going to work together to make that work happen. So it is an exciting time for the district.
And maybe if I might add, that's why it seemed to me that it's all kind of flowing relatively nicely, yes. And again, you're going to have bumps in the road and, and all this kind of stuff, but it's moving in, I think, the direction that we want to be moving in, So just kudos to everyone. And Ms. Savage, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just making a different perspective, out
I
there.
do not feel argued with, and I agree with everything you said.
Very good.
Sure.
I echo everybody's sentiments and kudos go all around. What I want to point out is that while it's become cool and trendy to talk about social justice and do things about social justice now in recent times, the work we have been doing all along is now coming to fruition. And while people are talking about things, we are actually acting on things. And I love where we are right now, and very happy.
Yes, I agree with you.
Ms. Bechtel, I don't know if you have anything to say about this now, or if this is just something to think about when you do your next presentation, where you're sort of summarizing how you've been doing. But I know that the Cabinet Data Dashboard, Leadership Dashboard, is now a tool that's becoming more and more practical and real. And one question that I know that I ask fairly regularly is what percentage of our staff who are currently working for us have received X, Y, or Z type of professional development. And I am hoping that that's something that's going to be built into the Cabinet Leadership Dashboard. So, for example, what percentage of our staff is supposed to have TCIS and what percentage actually do have it? Those kinds of questions. Is that realistic for me to think that that's going to be coming out of the data dashboard, or how is that working?
I'm unaware of that aspect of the data dashboard. I think it's a good idea. We've been wanting to do that. Like what I've been wanting to do really for several years is develop that profile of what every CSDA teacher needs to know and be able to do, and establish sort of a framework for the number of hours in that area, and then try to keep track of that in such a way that we could, just as you said, determine who has what they're supposed to have, and how are we going to fill the gaps for this individual. We've had a couple of even meetings about that profile. Our problem is really around time, and our time for professional development. When we sit down and we really think about it, we have these 18 hours of professional development days, 3 6-hour days. And then convocation, but then there's always building time there. And then we have our CPT time, but that's so focused on the instructional program. And then we have these competing priorities. So I like the idea, and I think I aspire to getting there. But those are some of the challenges. We only have so much time with staff.
I understand. I just know that from the board level, it's so interesting, like your perspective, which is the right perspective for you, is what does each individual have and what do I need to do to help them get where they need to be? Whereas my perspective is looking at the district overall, what percentage of our teachers have what they need to have, right? Because that's the metric that I can deal with, not individual. So it'll be wonderful as we grow our ability to look at the quantitative results as well as, of course, the qualitative results. I see Dr. Stur and Vicki, you both have your hands up. I'm not sure if that's residual or current. Down. Ms. Smith, did you have something to add, or is that just
Hand up.
Lower hand?
You're muted.
Oh, okay.
You're muted.
Sorry, thank you. I'm going on and on talking to somebody. But don't the walkthroughs help us get to some of that information?
Yes.
Right. I just wanted to. It's not that it's not being captured in some way. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, now that you say that, the walkthrough and the walkthrough system truly does help us, help all of us raise the capacity of us as a collective.
Superintendent Adams, did you have something you wanted to add?
So just along those lines with regard to the reporting, so the question that you asked, President Savage, I'm going to answer it with another question. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible to capture that information. We just have to define it. in the system so that we can actually report on that. But I think it's one of those critical points. If you go back to when we started talking about CRE, the culturally relevant education, and we needed to know how many teachers do we need to train in order to get to the tipping point. And we were able to determine how many people had been trained and how much more did we need to go. And then realizing that if we didn't accelerate and if we didn't start doing things differently, it would take us 10 years to actually train the entire staff. And so we know that we didn't have 10 years. So that's why we had to look at a different way of getting CRE out into our buildings and into our practices. And so the question that you're asking about how many have had X, Y, and Z, and then taking it one step further, not only have they had it, how are they using that training and embedding it into their practices? That's that next level. And so if we were to define it in the correct way, we could capture that information. And so I'll put Ms. Bechtel on the spot and say that that's something that we'll start working on to see how we can define that so that we can capture that data and then use it to help us make some decisions.
And actually, I was thinking while I had this minute that for TCIS in particular, we do have that data about who has had it and that has been captured. Dr. Canzoni-Ball's office collects that. It's just things like how many hours of work and instructional strategies have folks had and what's the right amount and those things. But I like the idea a lot. And I know that working with Trisha Wolf, who is a genius with the data dashboards, and Mr. Baker, we can certainly come up with something that's meaningful for all of us.
That would be great. I mean, one of the best practices that we get trained on all the time through our New York State School Boards Association is how can a board use data, right? How can a board make data-driven decisions? And this is a perfect example, right? Where should we be putting resources in professional development? Well, the only ways, as the superintendent said just a minute ago, is like, let's see where we're at, what we're doing. Is that enough? You guys are making those operational decisions, but we, in our oversight role, to be able to see that is really helpful for us to understand. I didn't mean that to go on for so long, but I am looking forward to getting to that kind of data. Superintendent Adams, do you still have your hand up, or is that a residual hand? Anyone else have anything else they want to talk about professional development? Otherwise, thank you again, Ms. Bechtel. We really appreciate all the work you put into this and the many, many weddings you host each year to implement it.
Thank you very much.
So that brings us to board committee reports. Board colleagues, I think the facilities committee gave a fairly substantial report. Ms. Smith, did you have anything else you want to add above and beyond what was happening at Albany High?
No, we're good. We will announce the next meeting shortly. Thank you.
And anybody else have a committee report that they wanted to offer? Seeing none, that brings us to other business. Any board member with an item of other business for the good of the order? Sorry, my screen is messing a little bit. Okay, then I think that means I get to ask.
No. One second.
Okay, sorry, Dr. Chittor, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, in terms of other business, I just wanted to, have a small discussion on property disposal. I know we've been going in a lot of board meetings, especially towards the end of the year when we get rid of old stuff, and we have a policy 6900 on it, which sort of discusses how we do it. And part of the ways to dispose it is to offer it to other organizations or sell it to other organizations or scrap material or what have you. But I just wanted to have a small discussion as to, are there ways that we can partner with our community partners to offer to see if if it is useful to them, give them first dibs at, I mean, rather than I'd rather see things being upcycled and recycled than going to trash if possible. And I guess in some cases, when you talk to people in the community, there's some sort of confusion as to people don't really know what happens to this stuff when it gets disposed of. So I was wondering if we could have a quick discussion with facilities or Ms. Roaring, just to clarify some of the points around this.
I would thank you very much, Madam President, Dr. Chatoor. I will turn the time to Ms. Roaring to address that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It depends on the items that we're looking to dispose of. So as you know, we've had some occasions this year where we are looking to dispose of items that would not be safe for us to offer to anyone else, either from the environment that we pulled it from or because it is broken or in poor repair. And that is something that we know immediately what we need to do is to just discard it as safely as possible. We have also taken opportunity this year as we've looked at some of our aged and well-worn and in some cases damaged furniture as we're moving on from Albany High to exercise the opportunity to scrap that where we can receive funds. We have been working very closely with a particular local partner on that to make sure that we are providing them with the pieces that would net us the most money. That is something that does take substantially more time for our staff to do than some of the other possible methods of disposal. We've also taken the opportunities, we've pulled items out of the north end of the loft building at Albany High to take those in better condition and then put those as our set-asides for the times of year when we require additional desk space, whether it's for testing, when we pull a bunch of students into the gym, or other opportunities when we need that additional seating space. And held on to those while we have taken those items, similar items that we have used for years that are not in such great shape, and we've chosen this time as our opportunity to get rid of those things that are well worn and do a great deal of that disposal through scrap as well. I do know there are some dumpsters outside of Albany High right now. Those are primarily filled with those items that we have determined to best dispose of that way in alignment with the board's policy 6900 as Dr. Chatoor brought forward. We are continuing to look at other opportunities where we may be able to offer them out as secondhand. As you may recall, last fall we had the opportunity to donate some well-used athletic equipment to the PAL program and let them take advantage of those things too. So we look very closely as the items come forward, depending on what they are, as to what may be that best way for us to dispose of them once the board has approved that disposition. I hope that helps answer the question.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other items of other business? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Wilson, seconded by Ms. Krejci, all in favor? That is unanimous ×6. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Good night.